Oh my God, I didn't even realize that the opening quote line for the title of this video is "You're a sociopath." I assume that's Elon Levy saying that, because that doesn't sound like something Hassan would say.
So let's get to our opening.
This is far too long to cover. You should pre-watch to pick segments if you cover it. First of all, you people are spoiled. We used to watch like insanely long shit on this channel. I know that like everything eventually over time flanderizes itself and caters to the ADHD, which I have as well, by the way. So I'm not like, you know, hating on that too much, but we used to watch some long videos on this channel. And second of all, if you pre-watch something, you take the soul out of it. That's why I never pre-watch. I come in like a buffoon every day. Every day I'm listen, okay? I don't consume political content when I'm not streaming, okay? I am like the Baron Harkonnen, all right? When stream is over, I lumber into a gigantic pool of ointment that I submerge my head into and rest for 18 hours until when the stream time begins yet again, I emerge, I levitate above it and float over to my studio and sit down and go right back to it, okay? I'm in the goddamn sensory deprivation chamber when I'm not streaming, because every day I wake up like fresh-faced, apple-cheeked, ready to experience life anew. And that's how you get the fresh takes out of me.
Statements. We want each of you to take a few minutes to explain why you're answering yes or no to our question: were Israel's actions in the Gaza war justified? And when I say were, I just want to be clear, we chose that word to talk about Israel's immediate actions after what happened on October 7th up through today. It's everything. It's not this moment, it's not that moment, it's the course of things. Elon, you are up first. Your answer to the question is
Can I 1 times 1 that? I have a feeling today's stream is going to run very long. So I'm going to 1 times 1 this, because we might have 2 massive videos to cover plus news.
Yes, the floor is yours. Please tell us why.
On October 7th, Hamas perpetrated an act of genocide against the people of Israel.
No.
Its death squads invaded with a clear mission: to massacre as many people as they could, as sadistically as they could, and to take survivors as hostages. Hamas had a strategy to lure Israel into an urban war and generate enough suffering that the world would pressure Israel to leave Hamas alone.
Israel's always the victim. They're being lured by like a ragtag group of terrorists and Islamist fighters when Israel is backed by the most powerful military on earth. You know, Israel's always just reacting to the things that happen to them. They're never the actor. They always react. Classic. Can you turn closed captions on? The closed captions suck on YouTube, like by default. I've already seen this. It's a great debate. It's only been out for 16 hours. Oh my God. I'm always late to the punch. I see. Also, the obsession with the narrative that Hamas was trying to massacre people in the most, like, vicious and painful way possible, again, like, it is, to me, in many ways, like the kind of extremist obsession you see with fascists, where, like, Hamas fighters can't just be terrorists or militants who are okay with civilian death. They have to all be, like, individually, like, you know, crazy, sociopathic, sadistic Hannibal Lecter types. I mean, look, Israel's the one right now that's, you know, throwing a goddamn celebration over the systemic rapes they're committing against the imprisoned Palestinians. In terms of, like, deliberately manufactured suffering, I think you can make a lot stronger of a case against Israel. Yeah, it's not enough that Hamas be, like, an oppositional political force. They all have to be cartoonishly evil.
To do it again and again. Hamas slaughtered 1,200 people on that day at a music festival and in their beds. They cremated little children alive. They perpetrated barbaric acts of sexual violence. They beheaded, tortured, and mutilated their victims alive and dead, and they did it with glee. And then they took...
Say like this, did it with glee. Like, this is this narrativizing about, like, Hamas aren't just evil. And a lot of the people in Hamas are, like, really bad. They're, like, Islamist, like, crazy anti-Semite. Like, yeah, no, we're not defending Hamas, but it's about the narrative, right?
Over 250 hostages, including little children, paraded them through the streets of Gaza to jeering crowds, hid them in tunnels and homes where they are being starved and tortured and raped and executed. It was the deadliest terror attack in world history after 9/11, the bloodiest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, and the opening shot of the Iranian regime's regional war against Israel.
Fascists always overreach with their rhetoric. Yeah, the jeering crowds, like, implicating all of Gaza, not just Hamas. All the hostages have been done as being, like, tortured, sexually assaulted. We know that's not true. Like, the conditions that the hostages have been kept in have varied significantly. Many of them have died due to Israel. The goal here is essentially, like, Israel is civilization and Hamas are barbarians. Like, that's essentially, like, the actual point of the narrative, right? That they're innately evil, they're fundamentally different. There's no, like, sociology to it, there's no history to it, there's no, like, you know, near a century of apartheid you can point to as a instigatory method. Like, it's just you have good and evil.
7 fronts. At this point, Israel faced a choice, as Hamas immediately threatened to do it again and again until Israel was destroyed. To do nothing.
How could Hamas ever destroy Israel? How does that even work? Come on.
Or to do something. Both would have consequences. Doing nothing meant letting Hamas get away with October 7th, leave it free to do it again and again, only this time with thousands of dangerous terrorists released from jail and with its popularity skyrocketing.
I mean, you could do this in the exact opposite direction. Like the barbarity that Israel has inflicted on Gaza, you could say from Hamas's perspective, what is Hamas supposed to do? Not do October 7th? Because if you don't do October 7th, you're telling Israel they can get away with doing the barbarity and the apartheid again and again and again. This argument goes in both directions, though Hamas has a better claim to it, obviously, because Israel's the one with the systemic power here. It doesn't work.
That's not an option. Doing something meant targeting Hamas's terrorists in accordance with international law in order to dismantle their ability to wage war.
It's a good thing that, like, international law hasn't condemned Israel then, or that'd be, like, super awkward.
And live out that threat to do it again and again. That was the choice that Israel faced after October 7th. Now, after October 7th, that campaign to bring Hamas down and bring the hostages home was the only moral response. Hamas exists for the sake of war.
Which is why Netanyahu has been shooting down hostage release deals for like 10 months now, yeah.
For the sake of peace, it must go. Let me explain Israel's strategy. Israel's strategy is to get civilians out of harm's way so that it can target Hamas's terrorist infrastructure under their feet.
Of course, Hamas's terrorist infrastructure is always right in the center of refugee camps, hospitals, and other places where people are. Curiously, a lot of Hamas infrastructure is in the family homes of Palestinian journalists who would have otherwise been able to record, the IDF's activities in Gaza. Apparently, Hamas activities have been recorded in the middle of the safe zones that Israel specifically designated as places that, the refugees could go unharmed. So, yeah, tunnels under school children's soccer fields, tunnels in the minds of Palestinian children. You know how it goes.
Hamas's strategy is to keep civilians in harm's way so that it can use them to shield their military infrastructure.
They've already done this rhetoric with Lebanon, too. Literally, like, the moment they have their eyes set on Lebanon, they do the exact same thing, the exact same rhetoric. Oh yeah, Lebanon has developed sophisticated cruise missile launch systems that have been retrofitted into what look like residential houses. Like, yeah, man, Hezbollah, the giant military force, is every residential home in southern Lebanon could be actually a military base. We have no choice but to do blanket strikes, which they've already begun doing. They killed hundreds of Lebanese civilians just yesterday.
Israel left Gaza in 2005 and never wanted to go back, but Hamas seized power 2 years later, started firing rockets at our cities, and rigged Gaza's urban landscape for war.
That's so true, man. Israel didn't want to go back to Gaza after they left in occupation. That's so true. Nothing but interest in an independent Gaza from Israel since, 2005 onward? Netanyahu's just, he loved the idea of a completely independent, uninvolved Israel and Gaza. That is so true.
He dug a network of military tunnels 1.5 times longer than New York subway under homes and schools and hospitals. They booby-trapped tens of thousands of buildings. They started firing rockets at our homes and our towns from inside their schools and their hospitals. In response, Israel's actions are to target Hamas's terrorists and to take unprecedented efforts to keep their civilians safe from their own leader's sick strategy to sacrifice them on the altar of jihad.
This is, again, like, it's the rhetoric of fascist. They can't, a fascist, a Zionist, can't merely make a claim. They have to make it to a point of absurdity. Israel has gone to the greatest lengths imaginable to protect civilians and to prevent people from being altered on the altar to jihad. Altar to jihad? What the f*** are you talking about? Like, you can never just make a claim. It always has to be elevated to absurdity, you know? Yeah, the world's most moral army. October 7th was the deadliest terror attack. Well, it depends on what you mean by terror attack, man. Like, it's always stuff like this.
Why it keeps repeatedly urging them to get out of harm's way from Hamas strongholds and flooding the area with over 1 million tons of aid, because it keeps saying this is a war against Hamas, not the people of Gaza. Now, the suffering of my neighbors in Gaza is horrific. I blame their psychopath leaders for launching this war, fighting it inside civilian areas, and refusing to release the hostages and surrender. Now, tonight's debate is about whether Israel's actions in the war in Gaza are justified, in a context in which I hope we can all agree none of the enemy's actions are justified. Because we are fighting a jihadist army that has as much respect for humanity and law as Mehdi Hassan has for the truth. Mehdi may say,
I see who they filled the audience with.
Hamas's acts on October 7th, but he will not condemn its strategy because he is part of its strategy. Hamas is counting on its defense attorney to shield it from the consequences of the war that it started and deflect blame onto Israel so it can do October 7th again, maybe because they share a goal that Israel shouldn't exist. Mehdi Hassan will say tonight that October 7th does not...
Again, it's like, no claim can be made in moderation. If you take any, like, criticism, if you make any criticism of Israel's actions, it's like internationally condemned actions, you're essentially like a jihadist who wants October 7th to happen again. It's the kind of insane hyperbole that you so often see by internet neo-Nazis, where like a cartoon adaptation of an old comic book that has a black character that used to be white is tantamount to white genocide. It's exactly the same kind of like insane, hysterical, alarmist screeching that like genuinely seems psychotic from the outside, but when you observe it and the psychology of the people who make it, it's not necessarily that they believe what they're saying, it's that they believe the sentiment of what they're saying. They use it as a weapon. If you actually grilled them down to the facts of it, they would have 1,000 deflections. They wouldn't stand by its central tenets.
Not justify Israel's actions in this horrible war. My question then is this.
Ilan, I'm sorry, your time is up.
What does October 7th...
I'm sorry, your time is up. Thank you. Mehdi? Ilan, in already calling your opponent a liar, you have already crossed one of the lines of the culture that we try to establish here. I wish you hadn't.
I don't mind. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
You don't.
Is this Levy bastard not on Netanyahu's shit list? Okay, if I remember correctly, this guy, like, was an Israeli official, and he was so over the top and monstrous, he made Israel look bad, and there was a dispute between him and Netanyahu's wife, because Netanyahu's wife thought that he was trying to, like, undermine Netanyahu with his behavior, and he ended up getting sacked. That's what I remember.
Need to do that to make your case, please. Mehdi Hassan, you are answering no in answer to the question, were Israel's actions in the Gaza war justified?
All right, so, ladies and gentlemen, the question, were they justified? Were the actions justified?
And it would be great if you didn't feel the need to respond to the personal attack, because it'll waste...
We'll decide when we get there, John. Were they justified? No, obviously not. Of course not. October the 7th, I think we can all agree, was a crime, a war crime, right? We can all agree on that. And taking hostages is a war crime. And those hostages should be released. But to destroy an entire place, an entire people in response is never justified. Never justified. How are we still... I don't understand how we're debating this more than 40,000 deaths later. I don't understand how we're still debating this sitting in the comfort of New York, 7,000 miles away from a place that the UN Secretary General has called hell on earth. Justified? Justified?
He's so
Is Israel justified in carrying out one of the most intense civilian punishment campaigns in history, according to Dr. Robert Pape at the University of Chicago, dropping 500-pound bombs, 1,000-pound bombs, 2,000-pound bombs on schools, hospitals, universities, bookstores, libraries, mosques, churches, refugee camps, apartment buildings, cemeteries, destroying a higher percentage of buildings in northern Gaza than the Allies destroyed in Dresden during World War II, reducing Gaza to 42 million tons of rubble while they got people out of the way? How is that justified?
You remember when the Biden administration, in showing like perhaps a sliver of one vertebra of a spine, briefly delayed providing Israel with 2,000-pound bombs, a weapon which can only be used for collateral damage. A 2,000-pound bomb produces an explosion which is so large that it cannot be used in an urban warfare context without, like, at the very least, they're endangering, likely killing civilians. They've certainly killed a lot of civilians. And Israel instantly screeched about how Biden was preventing them from fighting the war and he wanted Hamas to win and so forth, right? Their precision 2,000-pound bombs, yeah, that's true.
A bomb, for example, on a 6-story apartment building in central Gaza last October, killing more than 100 people inside, including more than 50 children.
The 2,000-pound bombs can burst people's organs over a block away. Yeah, this is one of the reasons why I feel like it's really difficult to talk about something like precision strikes. America can do precision strikes. As much monstrous stuff as we've done, we have the technology and the capability to do very, 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 very careful strikes when we want to and when we have the intel to. Like our cute little sword missiles, you know? Very cool stuff. Not to say that we use them responsibly, just saying we have the ability. Israel also has the ability. The number of civilian deaths that Israel has caused with weapons that are capable of avoiding civilian deaths is deliberate. It's not just them being careless. They have weapons that are capable of precision strikes, and they're choosing not to use them. They have the ability, with their intel, with their... The Gaza Strip is tiny. It doesn't take much to get a full, assessment of the situation. Who's where. You can get live satellite feeds. It's not hard. They have the intel. They choose not to use it. They choose to kill indiscriminately. Also, we've hit $6,000 to help Kamala Harris beat Trump. Kamala Harris, as soon as she gets in, she's going to fix the whole Middle East problem, folks. She's going to be a friend to everyone. Israel, Hamas, Iran, I'm telling you, it's going to work. ! PV donate, folks.
With no Hamas target in sight, according to Human Rights Watch, with no explanation offered by the Israeli military. Even till today, was that justified, Elon? Was Israel justified in telling people to go to safe zones and then bombing them and killing them in those safe zones? According to NBC, there were 7 deadly airstrikes between January and April in areas that the Israeli military had specifically designated as safe zones, killing Palestinian civilians like Sabrine Sakani, who was 30 weeks pregnant at the time. She was killed in a safe zone in April. Her little baby, newborn baby, died less than a week later. Was that justified too, Elon? Was Israel justified in killing a record number of kids in Gaza, 16,000 children, turning Gaza into what the UN has called a graveyard for children, according to Save the Children, killing more kids in the first 3 weeks that were killed globally in each of the past 4 years?
Can we get him on the 1v20 Jubilee videos? I think that would be very good content. Jubilee, are you watching this? I'm just saying. It wouldn't be very fair.
Killing little kids like 6-year-old Hind Rajab and her 15-year-old sister Leanne, firing 335 bullets into the car they were in. 335 bullets. And then killing the 2 paramedics who went to try and rescue them. Was that justified too, Elon? Was Israel justified in killing a record number of aid workers in Gaza? Right? A record number. Targeting again and again. Systematically, car by car, according to Chef Jose Andres, a specifically, explicitly marked World Central Kitchen aid convoy killing 7 aid workers in the process. Was that justified? Was Israel justified in starving the people of Gaza, using food and water as a weapon of war, to quote both the EU and Oxfam? Was Israel justified in blocking aid trucks from going into Gaza simply because they carry things like crutches?
Jackass is not smiling now. Well, Elon Levy's trying not to come from the graphic descriptions of all the Palestinians who have been killed, so he can't smile. He's like very focused right now.
Clippers and even chocolate croissants, according to the Washington Post. Was Israel justified in raping, sodomizing Palestinian detainees who were charged with no crimes whatsoever? Putting hot rods up their rectums. Amputating their limbs, according to CNN and the New York Times. Was that rape and torture justified, Elon? Israel, according to the ICC chief prosecutor, who put out a statement calling for the arrest of Elon's...
I've been trying to donate PV, but I'm not a U.S. citizen, so I don't have a U.S. passport number. Yes, you cannot donate to PV if you're not a U.S. citizen. That's why in the click here to accept terms and conditions at the bottom of the credit card fill-in, it says, I swear on penalty of the United States government assassinating me that I am a U.S. citizen. So there is a reason for that. But you have donated to me, so that's kind of like donating to PV in the sense that I will also save America from Trump. Thank you.
Former boss Benjamin Netanyahu said that Israel may have military goals, legitimate goals, but the way they're carried out, killing innocent people, starving people, is criminal, he said. Criminal, think about that. Eylon Levy is a former spokesperson for a man who the ICC chief prosecutor once arrested for war crimes. Eylon himself has produced a number of lies, sorry John, in service of those war crimes. He has a bunch of tweets still up tonight which say that babies were beheaded on October the 7th, babies were baked in ovens, babies were ripped from their mother's wombs. October 7th was bad enough, but Eylon had to exaggerate it for atrocity purposes. Those tweets are still up. Why would you trust anything this man says to you tonight?
Yeah, see, that's kind of the point that I make too, right? You could never... See, maybe this is just because I'm a different kind of guy, but when Hamas killed a bunch of Israeli civilians on October 7th, I thought that was bad. I know, crazy stuff, right? I thought that was, like, really morally wrong for them to do that, but that's not enough to the fascist, because to the fascist, it always, again, they did the same thing with blood libel, right? In the totality of like Germany and Poland and all the places where there were Jews before the Holocaust, did any Jew ever do anything wrong? Well, sure, they're people, right? But that's never enough. It's never enough to use reality because the fascist despises reality. They have to invent an imaginary, hyperbolized reality in which they are ludicrously morally in the right and their enemies are disgustingly, demonically, and it's never for sociological reasons. The fascist can never acknowledge that environmental conditions shape people, because if you do that, then you have to ask, what environmental conditions have Palestinians been subjected to that might make them not like Israel? Oh, hold on. Now we're getting into history we don't want to look into. No. So instead, we reject sociology, we reject history, we look only at the supposed innate character of men's souls. And that's why fascists are always giving you the insane... It's like with Haitians right now in Springfield. I ask you, have you seen any effort from the right-wing media who are, who have bought into the Haitian eating pets, whatever, so-and-so? Have you seen any of them delve into the history of Haiti? I know that sounds like a trite question, but like, if the accusation is Haitian migrants are eating pets, well, that would kind of imply like a great deal of hunger or desperation on their part. Is there any have any of them gone like, well, maybe if they're doing that, the reason they're doing that is because Haiti is like miserably poor? Have you seen any of that? Because I haven't. In their propaganda, Haitians eat cats and dogs because they are less developed people. There's no room for sociology. There's no room for environment. That's it. And that's what we're seeing here. You all understand what I'm saying, right? I hope this makes sense. It's just ways, it's patterns. It's patterns you can identify.
Look, he's here. He's here. He's here to gaslight you, to defend the indefensible, to excuse the inexcusable, to justify the unjustifiable, but you don't need to. Tonight you can choose to be on the side not of cruelty, not of criminality, but on the side of the innocent people of Gaza who are being killed as we speak tonight, as we speak, by Eylon's former colleagues in the Israeli military on the orders of Eylon's former bosses in the Israeli government. So yes, I choose to oppose this horrific and homicidal motion. Thank you.
Notice how a seasoned debater, maybe one of the most seasoned debaters, Mehdi Hasan, did not go point by point responding to what the fascist said, but rather led with his own strong opening argument, only referring to tendencies in or patterns in what the fascist said. Very smart, very good, very demure.
So we're going to have a discussion with that's a little bit looser in format. But
Mehdi Hasan is literally you, except he doesn't misspeak. Don't denigrate him. He's a far better debater than I am or ever will be. I'm totally okay with admitting that. Man's a generational talent. We got to respect that.
First thing I want to say to each of you is, this mutual urination contest is not helping us understand the principles involved. All right, you think he tells untruths, you think he tells untruths. You don't need to keep hitting that point, I hope, to make your argument. And again, it's not what we're about.
Sorry.
Eylon, I heard you in your opening statement say that the only moral response was for Israel to try to take Hamas down and to get the hostages home. I heard your opponent say that the manner in which it's happening is just enormous overreach with enormous consequences for an enormous number of people that he would certainly say, and I think a number of others would agree, are innocent people, not all of them, but some of them, and that represents an unjustifiable response. What we're talking about, it seems like, is proportionality. And I want you to address the issue of proportionality. This has been calculated in a number of ways. People have said that, as you said, it was the worst terrorist attack since September 11, 2001. But others would say that the number of people killed on both sides is wildly out of balance and therefore disproportionate. There's an issue to be discussed here. There's a principle to be discussed here, and that's proportionality. And what, in your view, justifies the proportionality that Israel has stepped up to in its response? And again, because I want things to move back and forth, I'll probably jump in on you after about 90 seconds, just so you have a sense.
Israel's response is proportionate to the threat that we face, which is the threat of annihilation. After perpetrating the savage atrocities of October 7th, the first thing Hamas did was deny that it did them. The second thing that it did was to threaten to do it again and again until Israel is destroyed. That is what is at stake. If this war ends with Hamas free, emboldened, and empowered to perpetrate more October 7th massacres, thinking that the world will keep saving it from the wars that it started. Now, proportionality is a term in international law. It doesn't mean that if they kill 1,000 people, you kill 1,000 people and call it quits. It means that for each strike, the anticipated collateral damage, the damage to civilians, cannot be excessive to the anticipated military goal.
And your argument is that that has been the principle Israel has observed?
Every military expert who has observed Israel's military efforts, including just recently in the Times, the Deputy Supreme Commander of NATO, has said that Israel is fighting in the most complicated urban battlefield that the world has ever seen, and he's satisfied that its rules of engagement and standard procedures are at least as rigorous as the UK and other Western allies. That's the former Deputy Supreme Commander of NATO.
Mehdi.
So I actually want to agree. I want to agree with something Eilon said. Proportionality is a difficult subject, and we shouldn't talk about this in abstract. X number here, Y number there. Let's talk specifics. The problem with a lot of spokespersons of Israel, they want to talk in abstract. I want to talk in specifics. So if we talk about proportionality, we talk about discrimination, we talk about war crimes. Last October, shortly after October 7th, Israeli forces struck a 3-story residential building in Gaza City. They killed 15 members of the Al-Dos family, 7 children. According to Amnesty International, the survivors say no warnings. Eilon told us there were warnings. No warnings were given to evacuate. Amnesty found no evidence of any military targets in the area, and Israel to this day has offered no explanation for that strike. So for the dead Al-Dos family members, Eilon, can you tell us why they were killed?
Mr. Hassan, the IDF does not owe you immediate answers, and the fact that...
That's the debate in a nutshell right there. Israel is fighting the most moral war ever. Okay, why did you just randomly murk this apartment building for no reason that no one has gotten an explanation for? We don't owe you an explanation for our methods. Yeah, that's pretty much it, right? That's pretty much a justification that you'd get, yeah. And keep in mind, by the way, that's not an unreasonable ask. A military is a massive bureaucratic organization. You can account for every missile fired. Like, nobody, it's not like you hit a button, 12 missiles get fired. It's like, oh yeah, we fired 12 missiles. The location, what fired them, who was behind the control pit or whatever, who hit the button, where the missiles landed, what their trajectories were. All of these are kept. They're logged. They're important information. They're all out there. None of this is like, it's not like World War II, where the way you did bombing was literally like you sent a bunch of planes and the pilot would look out the window to see if there were lights below and then hit the big button that opened the bomb bay, right? Like that, it's the modern military. They can keep track of every round. They literally do. If you have served in the US military, then you will know. You can't fire a shot and have it go unlogged. You can't like run off on a patrol and then randomly empty your magazine into like a stop sign or whatever, and then come back and like no one knows, no one cares. Where the f did those 30 bullets go? Excuse me, where did those 30 bullets go? You gotta file some paperwork now, mother. The IDF knows where it sends its missiles. It just doesn't care that it's killing innocent people.
Amnesty speaks. The fact that Amnesty speaks to local witnesses intimidated by Hamas does not mean that there was not a military target.
But was there? Because Israel has never said there was a military target.
Hamas booby-trapped.
And right there again, if people have said there was no military target, it's because they were intimidated by Hamas. But then, as Hassan points out, the IDF has never claimed there was a military target. So the fascist is making these claims presumptively without even knowing that was the defense offered by the IDF. To him, it doesn't matter what the specific defense was because he just likes it when Palestinians are killed. He's not interested in resolving this. This is not an issue he's curious about. The fascist has no interest in knowing why the IDF killed those Palestinians because he knows it's because they're Palestinians. So he has no curiosity. The question is answered to him. He just can't be honest with it.
40% of Gaza's buildings. It dug tunnels underneath homes and schools.
We're back to generalities, Elon.
No, not
Why did you kill 15 members of the Al-Dos family?
I do not know, and I do not need to explain every single strike.
You do. That's what you're here today.
Mehdi,
no, Mr. Hassan. Because in this war, Israel is seeking to neutralize the threat of a terrorist army that has a deliberate strategy.
I'm going to have to get the mic cut switch,
innocent
please.
Civilians.
Thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
Hamas has a deliberate strategy of sacrificing its innocent civilians, and this is a strategy that you are enabling by always deflecting blame onto Israel instead of considering the real...
Deflecting blame onto Israel for a strike Israel did. Like, the specific thing that he brought up was a strike Israel did. How dare you suggest Israel might be responsible for a targeted strike by the IDF?
Question of why Hamas built its military assets into civilian areas. Under international law, Israel is obligated to give precaution where those feasible precautions are possible.
Okay,
and it has done that by
let Mehdi come in, please.
urging...
I need to say two things. To be clear. To be clear.
6,500, by the way. You guys are killing it.
15 people were killed, 7 children. You were spokesperson for the Israeli government at the time. Israel has never given an explanation. When you say I do not need to explain myself, you literally do. You were the spokesperson for the government that committed a war crime, and you came to a debate tonight to defend war crimes.
It's literally your job. Like, that's it. It's not, you're not just like a random defender of the topic. Was explicitly your job. It's insane. It's insane. It's insane.
So you literally do. Number two, you'll notice, John, how Elon quickly went to abstract generalities. Let's talk specifics. Let's talk about tunnels. I think it's abhorrent to hide tunnels under civilian targets. I wish they didn't do that. But when Israel shoots children in the head, 3 American doctors went to Gaza. Dr. Feyyaz Sidra, Dr. Irfan Galaria, and a Jewish American doctor called Dr. Mark Perlmutter. All of them came back at separate times, said children were brought into hospitals we were in with gunshot to the head, sniper shots. Perfect. Exact targets. There is no tunnel that justifies shooting toddlers.
Well, now there's a tunnel in their head.
In the head. Israeli snipers. Or you can tell us why. You can defend them.
Mehdi, forgive me for going abstract, but
and by the way, I should note this idea of like, so Hamas objectively uses human shields. 100%. That's miserable behavior. However, it's a very asymmetrically made claim. First of all, the Gaza Strip is incredibly dense. You know? It's almost impossible to construct military infrastructure within it without there being at least the threat of adjacency to civilians. Not saying they don't up that deliberately, they do. But also, military infrastructure is kept adjacent to civilian infrastructure all over the world. Like, all over the world. It's not as though Israel doesn't have military infrastructure that's embedded in its civilian populations. Like, they do. And it's you know, we have an asymmetrical response to this as well, where if an Israeli civilian is killed in the process of an attack on an IDF facility, which was to an extent what happened during October 7th, Hamas was deliberately killing many civilians, but if you wanted to use like an Israeli tier, anything is justified as long as it's intended as an attack against a military target, you could apply that there as well. But then that gets treated like, you know, deliberate attacks on civilians, which they are, but then when Israel does the same thing, it doesn't. Does that make sense? Like, we have a very different standard, where if we applied Israel's standard for what they can get away with because they're targeting a military target, then you could apply that to so many terrorist groups. A double standard, if you will. I know I'm so smart for recognizing one of those exists here.
I do want to go to some principles here. So you are listing a number of specific incidents that you feel cumulatively add up to a very, very much an overreaction.
War crimes, John, not an overreaction, war crimes.
All right, you call them war crimes.
A great example of this is when I was in Rojava, when ISIS was about to be kicked out of a town, they'd take the remaining civilians hostage in order to keep a secure a safe retreat, and we had to let them do it. Yeah, the solution to human shields is generally not to shoot the shields, you know? That's normally like, pardon me for being soy and Reddit-pilled for a moment, but like my understanding while watching like movies is that that's the bad thing, right? That's the thing we make fun of Spetsnaz for, right? When there was that hostage situation and Russian special forces went in and murked everyone. Like the hostages, the terrorists, everyone. Like I thought, like that was met with international condemnation. But I guess we just accept it when Israel does it.
In not so much in the abstract, but what would have been an appropriate response to what happened that would not cross the line to proportionality?
That school, Posadishan, the one where the hostages got I forget the name.
I'll answer that in two ways. One is, I'm not someone who has ever, and you can look at my record on this, whether it's the UK, the US, both of my countries, I'm American, British, I've criticized targeted assassinations, even by the US and the UK. I'm the loser, and people in New York, there's going to be an unpopular statement, who says that people like bin Laden should be tried, not assassinated. That's who I'm, a stinking liberal. But given we live in a world where America, Britain, Israel, multiple countries, India is now accused of targeting its enemies, killing assassinating, you could have tried to take out the leaders of the group without wiping out the entire place. I find it interesting that Israel, hold on. I find it interesting that Israel was able to pinpoint kill Ismail Haniyeh in a house in a foreign country. But when it comes to Gaza, when it comes to the Gaza Strip, they had to wipe
Israel when making like targeted attacks outside the country, pager bombs, walkie-talkie bombs, pinpoint strikes that get their targets, you know? Israel when Gaza is 4 feet next to them. You know, they have the weapons. They have the ability to do precise strikes. They just don't care.
Out the whole place. They had to reduce it to 42 million tons of rubble. And one final point, I just got on factual points. Elon, they're not your neighbors, they're people you occupy, just to be clear.
So
that's also true. He did that. I didn't point it out. That's on me. The Israeli fascists love to dance on the point of like Gaza being not Israel, but also not a separate country. In a way, they kind of treat it like a colony, which is apropos, right? Because that kind of is what it is. It's a colonized settlement. But they don't want to acknowledge that it's colonized. So they do this weird thing where, like, the Palestinians aren't ours, but they're... Like, objectively, the Gaza Strip is under the Israeli umbrella of, I don't know what you say, like, permitted violence, you know? Whether or not you think that's legally just, that is the de facto state of affairs. It's under their control. But clearly not a part of the same country. I mean, not legally, certainly not socially, not the way they talk about it. So is it an occupation? Well, of course it is. But the fascist here would talk about them like neighbors, like they're a separate country, while still controlling their water supply.
I'm hoping you'll let point number 2 slide, and please take on point number 1. Mehdi's saying that there would have been a self-defense response that he feels might have been more appropriate, that he also feels would have been within the capability of the Israeli military. What's your response to that?
No, just the general pattern of argumentation we're seeing here. Gosh, October 7th was terrible. Hamas shouldn't have done that. Gosh, Hamas built tunnels under schools and hospitals. It shouldn't have done that. The question is what Israel may legitimately do once
No, that's not the question I asked you.
No, but I'm
what you did. It's what you did.
And his response...
It's what you did.
And Mr. Hassan's response is, well, if Israel could take out a terrorist leader thousands of miles away who wasn't expecting that he could be targeted, surely it can reach the terrorists who are hiding inside a bunker, under a hospital, probably surrounded by hostages as human shields. Hamas rigged the battlefield. Hamas rigged the battlefield to shield its military assets under civilians, and it left Israel with no option of getting to those leaders.
Okay, no option, no other option. No option is what your opponent is saying.
So first of all, as we've discussed, and I'm here all night.
There's one psycho lady in the audience that screams every time the fascist talks. Yeah, there is. I think there are more people here who support Hassan, which makes sense considering where he is, but there's like a small, extremely screechy contingent of people who yell every time the fascist says anything.
can take his time. They killed 15 members of the Doss family, 7 children.
We can continue this at the reception afterwards if you want.
And I'll happily ask you, why did the government that you served in kill 15 innocent people in an apartment building? Hold on, this is very important because there's no evidence Hamas was there. He's not even tried to make that claim.
Mehdi, just in the interest of time, you've asked it. It's become a rhetorical question.
It's crucial to the argument.
He's saying
it's not. No, it's soy. It's not rhetorical. The fact that the IDF can't account for it or just chooses not to is actually the point. Like, if the IDF can indiscriminately kill civilians with no explanation or justification, and then, like, there's nothing after that, that's the point. That proves the entire point right there. No just or moral military could engage in that behavior and get away with it.
He's saying there was no. When he says there was no other option, what is your response to that?
Well, no one in the world agrees with that. That's why Israel's become a pariah in the world, because even
what was the option, Mr. Hassan? What would you have had us do?
Even Joe Biden, the most
what does October 7th justify?
I already answered that question. Even Joe Biden, the most pro-Israel president of my lifetime, who has backed Israel with weapons and arms, has gone on the record saying too much indiscriminate bombing. You've killed too many innocent people. Even the people on your own side say you're killing too many people, Elon. But you will not accept that.
Mr. Hassan, too many people have been killed. The number of people who should have been killed.
Too many people have been killed, not assigning like blame or responsibility, even though 90%, 95%, whatever, a significant, overwhelming percentage of the people who have been killed by the IDF, you know.
Zero. Too many people were killed when Hamas's psychopath leaders.
Psychopath leaders, again, we refer once more to psychology. It can't be that material, and pardon me for like the Marxist soy analysis over here, but it is very, very important. They must always be animals. This is like the fundamental belief of the fascist when assigning the in-group and out-group. The out-group can never just be a group of people with different beliefs, because if you accept that it's just a group of people with different beliefs, that invites questions. Why do they have those different beliefs? What led them to have those beliefs? They have to be animals. They always have to be animals. And the fascist here will constantly refer to them as such. And we see these patterns emerge all over the place with the Haitians. Anti-Semites do this with Jews as well. There's never any thought given to why they believe the things they believe, which is one of the reasons why I try to engage with the psychology of people who I disagree with, even when I really hate them, which is why I'm talking about the psychology here or the beliefs of the fascist. I don't think his brain is innately different to mine, I guess, apart from the fact that like everyone's brain is different because we're all different or whatever. But like, I don't think there's a categorical difference between my brain and the brain of Eylon Levy or whatever. I don't think that he was born different in a way that made him the monster that he is now. I think that, you know, conditions, exposure, blah, 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 blah. We've talked about this in fascist circles in America, in Israel, everywhere. You know, you have to understand why people become the way they are. Hamas did not become jihadist, militant, in many cases very anti-Semitic, like because they were born animals. It was because they were born in occupied apartheid Gaza, where their resources and their daily needs and their dignity were stripped of them by an occupying force with 1,000 times as much military power. That's what made them what they are. But, of course, if you engage with this, you kind of lose the plot from the fascist perspective, so it has to be they're psychopaths, they're animals, they're such and such.
Who are funded by your paymasters in Qatar, maybe you share a slack.
All right, let's please
I'm going to respond to that.
No.
Why do you constantly need to call them anti-Semitic? Because much of Hamas is anti-Semitic. I'm sure there are members of Hamas who are a little bit more pragmatic and militant, but yeah, there are a ton of anti-Semites in Hamas, 100%. Jihadist groups are not known for being like principled, utilitarian advocates for positive change. They, you know, if people are willing to die for a cause, they tend to be a little loony pants, you know.
Your paymasters in Qatar, maybe you share a slack.
All right, let's please
I'm going to respond to that. I'm going to respond to that.
No. It's another cheap shot, and I don't want to entertain cheap shots. I want to go to you, Elon, with this question. When you say that the war is justified, killing in war can only be justified if it serves a greater good. What's the greater good that's being served at this moment?
Mr. Donovan, this war is not justified because Hamas should not have started this war in the first place.
Well, the question is whether
the question
you are arguing, you are answering the question. Yes, Israel's actions are justified.
The response is an attempt to prevent the next October 7th massacre.
Well,
on October 7th, Hamas showed us what it was capable of doing, and they immediately went on TV and said, October 7th, October 10th, October 1 millionth. Everything we do is justified. We're a nation of martyrs, they said. We're proud to sacrifice.
They are a nation of martyrs. That's almost definitionally true, and Israel made that the case. I mean, I have to refer to the skill issue here of, if you don't want an October 7th to happen, simply don't oppress a, like, you know, ethnic minority and build a concentration camp around them and keep them that way for decades and decades, because that tends to make them really resentful, if you can believe it. That's just that's just like an opinion of mine. I don't know. I feel like maybe if we kind of had equality for all in the region, we could do a lot more work. Yeah, maybe don't, like, gun down innocent protesters who march towards the fences that you've encased them within, you know?
Millions of martyrs, if that's what it takes. And we are trying to stop October 7th, and to do so in a way that minimizes the cost to their civilians.
Let me just deal with the last point and the previous point, which is the idea. Let's just be real here. And a lot of military experts say this, but you don't even need military experts. You just need common sense. The idea that you prevent another October the 7th, or that you destroy Hamas by making tens of thousands of Palestinian children orphans, is insane. It doesn't protect Israel. Forget Gaza. It doesn't protect Israel. And let me just deal with this.
Of course, this point is only inconsistent if you don't have an insight into the mind of the fascist, where in their world, all the Palestinians are dead. It's true. You don't get rid of a terrorist group by only killing, like, the top, like the most 10% most militant people in a population. That just creates more terrorists. You get rid of a terrorist group by killing all of them, which is what they want to do. Like, pretty explicitly, that's what they want to do. So that would be one way of handling it. I think it's a little dicey, like, morally speaking.
Classic, my paymasters in Qatar. Yes, I host a show for Al Jazeera English. Let's just be very clear. In December, the New York Times published a very, very long piece.
On. Nobody
very important
cares.
here, very important here. It's relevant to the debate. The New York Times.
All right, make it relevant. Please make it relevant.
New York Times published a very long piece which said, a month before October the 7th, the head of the Mossad, David Barnier, went to Doha, Qatar, and the Qatari said, do you want us to keep sending money to Gaza? And he went back to Netanyahu. He said, what should I say? And Netanyahu said, yes, please. And he went back. He said, yes, please send the money to Gaza. Elon went to work for the government of Benjamin Netanyahu a month after that. He's never apologized for that to the Israeli people. Benjamin Netanyahu's never apologized for that to the Israeli people. So if anyone should answer questions about Qatari funding of Hamas, allegedly, reportedly, whatever you want to call it, it's the Israeli government that facilitated it for many, many years. Elon was in that government. He's the spokesperson for that government.
It was a terrible mistake to allow Qatari money into Gaza on the mistaken belief that if we improve civilian life in Gaza, create jobs, create opportunity, Hamas's psychopath leaders won't launch this war. They went straight on.
See, like, again, you're kind of it's the willful rejection of material conditions. This is one of the reasons why fascists despise Marxists, and it's one of the reasons why the Marxists were the first people the Nazis killed. Because ideologically, the first thing that you have to do is make everyone think in essentialist terms. You know? You really don't want people thinking about what conditions lead to what. The money Mehdi is talking about here was to pay the wages of workers in Gaza. That's well known. What was the contradiction? Yeah, exactly, Flevier. So now the fascist can throw his arms up in the air and he can say, well, sorry, we tried to treat the Palestinians well. I guess it, bit us in the ass. It's like, that's what he wants to do here, We tried to reach out to them. He's arguing Israel shouldn't have allowed them to send that money. It's an issue on which I could stand to do a bit of wiki browsing before I get heated with anyone. If I criticize Mehdi Hassan, he might appear behind me. I've already said his name more than 3 times. I have to be conscious of this, okay? There's always a bigger fish.
On TV and said, we tricked the Israelis. We made them think that we were concerned about the civilians in Gaza, all the while we were taking that money to build the tunnels and the weapons and the rockets we are firing at Israel. If we had known, Mr. Hassan, what Hamas was going to do on October 7th, perhaps we should have started a preemptive war to eliminate.
I mean, like, it doesn't even, like, need analysis, really. It's just always, like, this is always the answer to the fascist. Like, perhaps if we had known the population was just naturally, evil, we should have eradicated them to begin with.
that threat before they could have burned the Simentov children alive on October 7th. But we didn't.
Okay.
Hamas
All right.
tricked us,
Time out.
and we won't
Time out.
repeat the same mistake again.
Time out. Going to take a little bit of a 10-second breath and slightly lower the temperature, but only slightly.
I can easily breathe more than once in 10
you were
seconds.
making the argument that Israel's actions are justified in the pursuit of the destruction of Hamas. We've come to the point, though, where even Israeli military officials are saying it can't be destroyed. Therefore, what happens to that argument that the justification is the destruction of Hamas if it's an organization, a movement that can't be destroyed?
Of course Hamas can be removed from power, just like ISIS was removed from power.
I think it's counterproductive to call Hamas anti-Semitic. Okay, this is an argument I'll swiftly resolve simply by banning people who disagree with me on this. Bigotry is not acceptable no matter what conditions you've been exposed to. It can be explained, like it is explainable that Hamas is anti-Semitic because a lot of them are literally like born in radical Islamic households that have known the oppression of the one Jewish state their entire life. But like, let's not pretend that doesn't mean that they're anti-Semitic. Like, it's anti-Semitism. That's it. Like, would you say that a white man isn't racist if he hates black people because he, like, was the only white kid in an all-black school and got picked on by black people? And then he was racist against black people, and you're like, well, he's not racist. Yes, he is racist. You can explain his racism. I mean, you can point to his life and go, oh, well, that's probably why he's racist. But that doesn't make it morally right. You can accept that. And, much in the same vein as Hamas, you wouldn't expect that guy to go forward in his life and have good positions on anything having to do with race just because he is an explainable racism, right? Like, likewise, Hamas's ability to manage both Gaza and their relation with Israel is compromised by the anti-Semitism.
This is now a terrorist organization that is trying to blow up concerts in Austria. It no longer controls territory the size of Austria. Following this war, we cannot allow the Hamas terrorist regime, it's not an organization, it's a terror regime and a terror army, to regroup, restock, rearm, and keep shooting rockets at our towns while it is still holding civilians. It is a regime that must be removed from power because we know exactly what it wants to do if given half a chance, and that is to do October 7th again and again. And Israel's war, Mr.
It's not an organization. The term organization confers a perceived sense of legitimacy. Hamas, to the fascist, Hamas must always be considered like a group of barbaric animals, like orcs. Like that is what they must be. To refer to them as an organization would give them a degree of perceived intelligence and, well, organization that is inconvenient to the fascist.
Hassan, I'll yield the stage to you and ask you, eliminating the Hamas terror regime, removing it from power, a legitimate military objective, yes or no?
Of course it's a legitimate military objective for Israel, and that's what I quoted the ICC chief prosecutor saying, but you're doing a very bad job of it. What's interesting?
Do I understand that after October 7th?
What John
do
said,
I understand? No, because I want to clarify and understand we're on the same page.
You want to clarify the guy who can't answer why you killed 15 civilians?
I think they're confused by the definition of racism being prejudice plus power. That's not the definition of racism. That's a soy-ass Tumblr, like, postgraduate sociology, anthropology student-ass definition that doesn't apply to the real world. Racism is when you're racially biased. Can a black guy be racist against white people? Yes. Get over it. All you have to do is differentiate between interpersonal and systemic racism. That's it. There's no systemic racism against white people in America, but there are plenty of people who are interpersonally racist against white people. It's just that interpersonal racism ain't anywhere near as big of a problem as systemic racism, obviously. But yeah, no, the racism equals prejudice plus power, that was always some bullshit for, like, let's be real here, pink-haired, fat-cheeked white people to pat themselves in the back over. You know, they came up with a woke definition that allowed, like, them to say black people can't be racist. What came of this discourse? What good for the world? What benefits to humanity, black or white? None. All it did was inflame argument. Deliberately confusing, counterintuitive, it did nothing but fuel counter-arguments. No. And hey, I bought into it for a while too. I'm not pretending that I wasn't, you know, for a time complicit in promoting that definition, but my eyes see clearly now.
That we are on the same page. Do you agree
I'll
that
answer your question
October
when you
7th,
answer mine.
it was legitimate for Israel to remove the Hamas terror regime in order to prevent another October 7th? It's a yes or no question, Mr. Hassan.
No, it's not. It's a loaded question. I'm going to say it was legitimate for Israel to defend its citizens inside of Israel. It's not legitimate to occupy Palestinian territory for decades on end. And let me answer. Can I actually answer what you came to
If I can rebut,
let me answer John's question.
But
Let me answer
Elon, you've had about 2 or 3 minutes in a row. Go ahead,
You asked a very interesting question of Elon. You pointed out that he keeps saying, notice the sleight of hand. You said that he said, and he said it many times, not just here, Hamas should be destroyed. When you asked him, Israeli military experts in general say it can't be destroyed. Notice what Elon said? He said, remove from power, quickly move the goalpost there, because he knows that Hamas can't be destroyed by these means. In fact, the former head of Israel's military,
said from
let me
the
finish
very
my point.
beginning.
The former head of Israel's military, who was a member of Netanyahu's war cabinet, he said earlier this year, quote, anyone who says you can destroy Hamas is telling Paul tales. So it's not me calling Elon Levy a liar, it's the former head of the Israeli military.
Mr. Hassan, from the beginning, Israel has said that its goals are to remove Hamas.
Has any group of people willingly or peacefully given up their land to another people? Yeah, well, when the Pilgrims had Thanksgiving with Native Americans, the Native Americans agreed to move 3,000 miles west. I think. That's what I was taught. Yeah, I can't think of any good examples. None that refute, like, the underlying argument you're making, at least. They lost the wishbone poll. They went for the skinnier half.
From power and dismantle its ability to wage war again and to live up its threat of repeat October 7th. And that is why I ask you, after October 7th, was it legitimate for Israel to remove Hamas from power in order to eliminate the threat of repeat October 7th? Yes or no?
Very simple.
I want to toss my own answer into this, by the way. This is an answer that's very difficult to offer because the default lefty response is, well, if I was Israel, I would have simply not kept Gaza in a concentration camp for decades, right, to prevent October 7th. What would you do if you were the Israeli PM and you were elected on October 6th and then October 7th happened? What would you do? So I'm going to be real with you guys. A military response from Israel was inevitable, obviously. Not only was it inevitable, I think you could argue it was justified. Even with all of the pre-existing context of what had been done to the Palestinians, let's not be, like, stupid here. You're not, as the leader of Israel, going to go, oh, they got that one. We have been pretty racist to them. They got that. Like, obviously, no. Like, yeah, let's be adults here. In my head, I would like to believe it would have been possible for a targeted reprisal that could have been engaged in alongside a set of reforms used as incentives to the Palestinian population to oust Hamas themselves. Keep in mind, Hamas does not do a good job leading the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. Hamas is not like a benevolent ruler of the Gaza Strip at all. They kill Palestinians. They threaten and torture them. They're a militant Islamist organization. That's true, Nuts. That's true. You can be restrained. I would like to believe it might have been possible, if Israel was super based and red-pilled, to engage in a targeted military response that would have incentivized the Palestinian people to give up Hamas on their own. To essentially say, like, you know, we will give you your water, your food, your land, your rights. We will correct this, but we need Hamas ousted. And ideally, you would put the Hamas leaders to trial, which gives you a lot more closure than killing them, though killing is a hell of a lot easier. Maybe this is a little bit naive on my part. I don't know if there's like a clean solution here, but I think the best outcome, the greatest possible outcome that could have happened, that wouldn't have been just magical, would have been down the line a whole bunch of arrested Hamas officials who objectively slaughtered civilians. Like their asses are going to jail forever. And a Palestinian population that is cautiously grateful that we are trading those Hamas leaders for a reissuing of their rights. Does that make sense? I'm speaking very simplistically right now because I don't want to spend like 5 hours talking about it, but that in my mind would have been the greatest possible world. That would have been nice. I don't know. I mean, we're never getting it back. We're in the dark timeline now. What would you say to someone who says they're against Netanyahu and his government, but not the state of Israel? I don't even know. I guess I'd call them a coward.
Answer. Israel has the right to defend its citizens in its territory. It doesn't have a right to be an occupier. It doesn't have a right to... Let me finish the point, because you think they're your neighbors. The International Court of Justice says Gaza and the West Bank are occupied. They've been occupied.
I can't drive to Wisconsin again. That's so far away. Can you phone bank? You can do that from anywhere. Hey, Do. And yeah, that's true. It's like a person who's just anti-Netanyahu but not anti-Israel, like in a fundamental sense. Like, what version of Israel wouldn't be doing the things that we dislike Netanyahu for doing? Where can we donate? I don't see the link. ! PV donate. It says it right here. I'm circling it with my mouse.
Every day since 1967. You did not withdraw in 2005. You blockaded.
I'd like to explain what the purpose here is of the legal fiction.
And I've already answered the question, Elon. I've made the point that even if I was an Israeli general trying to destroy Hamas, killing thousands of innocent people only helps Hamas. Every terrorism expert in the world says you're a recruiting sergeant for extremist groups when you go and kill innocent civilians.
Mr. Hassan, whether this war...
Time out, Elon. Time out. I have a question for whoever wants to jump on it. Is Israel's war in Gaza making Israel more secure?
When this war began, Hamas had a fearsome missile arsenal that rained thousands of missiles on our cities. I had to keep running into a rocket shelter. Israel has now eliminated the threat of rocket fire from Gaza. It has cut off its smuggling routes. It has destroyed its missile silos, and it has destroyed Hamas's weapons capabilities. That alone has made us safer and makes it easier to sleep in our beds at night.
Three quick.
And yet, Netanyahu still says the war won't stop. In fact, not only has Netanyahu not said the war will stop, he has said he is opposed to any ceasefire and refuses to give any timeline for stopping the war.
Things. Number one, the Israelis went to Supreme Court recently and they were having an argument in Israel's Supreme Court, and they put in the official filing that we do not control Gaza. Even after all this time, Hamas is still in control of lots of parts of Gaza. So they say the honest stuff when you're not looking.
True.
Number two, I interviewed Ami Ayalon recently, former head of Shin Bet, former Israeli admiral. He said very explicitly, Israel will not be safe until we give Palestinians freedom. This is his words, not my words. And number three,
Did Val speed it up? It's at 1.1 times.
I'm glad you had a bomb shelter to protect you, because the Al-Dos family in Gaza did not have a bomb shelter.
Back to the point. Got that right here.
Another question. We have not yet talked about the hostages, and we should. Is Israel's action in Gaza going to is it for the benefit of the hostages?
Absolutely. Israel is fighting to
This is like a comical point to defend. The idea that this is being done to the benefit of the hostages, almost all of whom are dead and gone, when Netanyahu refuses any hostage exchange. Like, it's ridiculous.
Bring the hostages home while Hamas is starving and torturing and raping them. We managed in November, because Hamas was being clobbered and it wanted a breather. They released nearly half...
The families of the hostages all hate Netanyahu. The protests outside in Tel Aviv are largely directed at Netanyahu for not accepting a ceasefire deal because they want the hostages back home. Doesn't give a shit about them. Thank you, Ted.
Of the hostages. We've sent in special forces to rescue hostages in raids my opponent has condemned. Israel is fighting to put the military pressure on Hamas to release the hostages, but Hamas doesn't want to release the hostages. And the reason it doesn't want to release the hostages is that it knows that the longer this war goes on and the more suffering it generates among its own people in Gaza, the more it advances its own goal of isolating Israel. And Mr. Hassan,
it's never Israel's own actions. It's Hamas that's isolating Israel, not, Israel. Oh, Austin, thank you for the 500 dono to PV. That's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. But it's always, the language is always of we are the victims, even when it is our actions that earn us condemnation. It's us being baited into those actions by Hamas, Yeah, poor little baby Israel.
It pains me that you do not seem to realize the role that you play within Hamas's strategy when you deflect blame onto Israel. Never demand any accountability. Never demand any accountability from the Hamas regime. When you know that Hamas's goal is to maximize suffering, you give it a reason to drag on this war. If you want it to let the hostages go, you should tell Qatar to pressure Hamas to free the hostages.
Of all the demonstrably untrue things you've said tonight, this is the big one. So apparently, If you want a deal to end the war, you're enabling Hamas's strategy.
No.
That's what you just said.
No,
I'm enabling Hamas's strategy. So,
but you have systematically undermined every leverage Israel has to free the hostages.
You know who's undermining?
Stop pretending
Can I
you
answer
care
the
about the
question?
hostages.
Of the two of us, hold on. Of the two of us, whose strategy has released more hostages, mine or yours? Because I supported a ceasefire. And we got, hold on.
Our strategy. Your strategy is to give cover for Hamas's war crime.
Let him finish, please.
Over 100 hostages were released last November in the pause, in the ceasefire deal. A lot of Israelis wanted that to continue. Hostages' families wanted that to continue.
Yes.
Yeah, that was the only time we got a significant release of hostages, was the one time they tried like a ceasefire deal, even though it was very temporary. And then Netanyahu was like, never again will I take a break from killing Palestinian civilians. Never again. That sucked. Yeah, he's like, he's getting withdrawals. Netanyahu's like, in the, you know, leaning against his desk. He's not doing that again. Did any of the hostages report being raped? I don't like contesting this because a lot of it is he said, she said, and also I don't remember all the details. But when the fascist makes claims like the hostages are all being starved and beaten and raped, like I just at default take that as a provide proof or I won't believe you. Not because I think it's impossible. It's totally possible. Hamas would definitely do that. The hostages they have obtained. But the obsession with the highly sensationalized, it's like the thing they did with the like 40 beheaded babies or baked in ovens babies during October 7th or whatever. Pardon my like cruel, calculated utilitarianism, but if you tell me 40 babies are dead, I already think that's pretty bad. But the obsession with like, you know, oh no, they weren't just killed, they were like super killed. Okay, all right, thank you, I guess. And the insistence on it. And then if they make like 20 claims that are psychotic and you say, I don't believe those, but one of the 20 ends up being true, they're like, wow, I can't believe you don't believe the such and such. You know what I mean? So I guess like by default, my position is if I see literally any pointed claim that looks legitimate on that front, I will believe it. But in general, if a fascist is screeching about it in a very like broad sense, I tend not to by default. And it doesn't matter. It still doesn't justify Israel's genocide of Palestinians. No, of course not. All I'm saying is that they want to bring it back to that conversation when I think it's almost definitionally a waste of time. The genocide of the Palestinians and the moral wrongness of that genocide are completely divorced from any insane claims that you could make about October 7th or about the treatment of the hostages. They are completely separate. But, of course, they want to always bring it back to that because for them it's about moral outrage. It's not actually about, like, preventing harm or keeping people from getting hurt.
Netanyahu, can I finish my answer? Netanyahu said no. In fact, I interviewed Zahiro Moore, whose uncle Avraham Munda was horribly killed in Gaza. Zahiro Moore, by the way, was arrested today. He's been arrested and attacked by the Israeli government that Elon served in multiple times. He said to me, Netanyahu and the government that Elon was part of, always choose the wrong way. Ever since October the 8th, everything they do is directed at not getting the...
Oh, and by the way, if you want to talk about disregarding people's lived experiences, remember when Hassan brought up the family who got destroyed by an Israeli airstrike early in the war, and then reflexively the fascists said, you know, maybe they were pressured by Hamas into saying that there were no military targets nearby. Without even knowing what Mehdi Hassan was talking about or knowing the claim, he instantly deferred to their claims about the nature of the attack were unjustified. So if there's between the fascist and Hassan, only one of them has reflexively like dismissed the experience of a person who has suffered, or an entire family who has suffered.
Hostages back. That is the plain truth. That is the nephew of a hostage. They don't want you to hear about the hostages. Elon and people like Elon use the hostages as political pawns. The hostages' families are standing on the streets of Tel Aviv opposing the Netanyahu government, calling for a ceasefire, calling for a deal. They don't like Elon leaving. They don't support Elon.
Mr. Hassan, how many hostage rallies have you spoken at? How many hostages' mothers have you embraced and hugged them and told them...
See, right, again, confronted with the facts, the fact that hostage families hate Netanyahu, we get this irrational, hysterical screeching, how many hostage families have you kissed on the lips? This, like, completely, like, not even a pretense of a rational argument. Just like, you know, how dare you?
I will give you whatever you need. I was at Central
Park. I was at Central Park last Sunday at the rally for the hostages. You were not.
Interesting. Central Park, not Tel Aviv, where the massive protests have continued for nearly a year now. You were at a different place? That's interesting. How many hostage families were at Central Park compared to the ones leading the protests at Tel Aviv? You know? Central Park, Israel. Oh, Central Park, Israel. My bad.
Mr. Hassan, if you really care about the hostages,
Let me ask you,
I have a spare hostage pin here. If you want to show them you care, you're welcome to put it on their tracker.
You may have brought up an objective fact, but I have a pin on me where I say, bring the hostages home. Take this virtue signal, Hassan, and shove it up your butthole.
All right, this is fantastic. Let's go. So,
push it on. Show them you care. Show them you care. I am in daily contact with the hostage families. I tell them I will do whatever it takes to help you get your kids home. Show them you care and stop trying to exploit.
Whatever it takes to get your kids home, except, of course, a hostage exchange for a ceasefire deal, the one thing that has worked.
Okay. Elon, allow him to respond. You've got your bit of stagecraft. Please take it.
Let's be clear. You saw the very, very performative outrage there from Elon there. To be clear, don't you lecture me about hostages when your government has killed more hostages than it has rescued. That's on you. That's on you.
You hear him? He's saying that is on Hamas. Like, again, the fascists can never accept responsibility for their own behavior or for the behavior of the state they defend. Everything is reactive. Everything is defensive. Everything is someone else forced us to do it. Every single time.
Hamas
all right.
I need to finish this point.
I'm going to let you finish this point, and then we're moving on.
I will happily support this pin because I support the release of all the hostages and let me finish. And I support the release of thousands of Palestinian detainees being raped and tortured and children. Do you support that? Let's swear it together. Do you support the release? Do you support the release of
no, that's different because they're different people. They're animals.
Palestinians?
I do not support the release
of Palestinian children. Do you support the release of Palestinian children?
Mr. Hassan, anyone who is...
Let's get some space here.
He can't answer the question.
Mr. Hassan, he won't get on the hostage.
I support the release of all innocent people.
Mehdi?
He doesn't. That's all you've got.
Once again.
Gimmicks.
Once again.
All you've got.
All right. I have one more question before we pivot to some questions from some journalists who are joining us, and I want to talk about America's involvement in the situation.
This guy's genuinely great, such a moral high ground. Yeah, I also think it's one of the reasons why, from both a political and rhetorical perspective, you really want to avoid the edgy, performative Twitter leftist nonsense. The, like, you know, Israel deserves to burn, or a statement I have never famously made, or like Hamas is justified, or like the performative anti-American hatred, which you see a lot from the left. The most effective way to get shit done, both in terms of like fronting policy and making arguments that people are convinced by, is by demonstrating moral consistency. I feel like there are a lot of people who might be like inclined to make really edgy comments about how like they don't care about the Israeli hostages, or they don't care about what happened on October 7th because of the treatment of the Palestinian people. They support the release of the Palestinian hostages, but not the Israeli hostages. They don't care as much because like boo boo wah wah, like, you know, that kind of stuff, right? And like performative edginess can be fun, obviously. I think that Mehdi Hasan shows how effective it can be to put your foot down and be the really consistent voice in the room. You know what I mean? Like to just flatly, like, I am in favor of all the hostages being released, and you are not. I am pro-life. I am pro-civilian life. What do you think of From the River to the Sea line? I don't think it's anti-Semitic. I do think it's unproductive. Nobody says From the River to the Sea to, like, convince new people. They say it because it's, like, cool to say it with their lefty crowd, okay? So, no, I don't think it's hate speech. No, I don't think it's anti-Semitic. I think that it's like a catchy, ineffective slogan that people do mostly for in-group signaling. Much like defund the police, in that it signals, but it's not very helpful. And as you might notice, the police are not defunded. But I also don't think that defund the police is like, I don't know, anti-American or like terroristic. Like, I think you can say like, you're not getting anything done with a statement without buying into the insane signaling.
The U.S. has been largely supporting Israel. If the war in Israel is unjustified, that implicates the U.S. in an unjust war. If the war is justified, then we have an ally that requires our help. Which is it?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
We have, it's about U.S. involvement in the war. If the war is unjustified, that implicates the U.S. in an unjust war.
That phrase can be anti-Semitic. It's too ambiguous. Well, if that's the case, then any negative statement made about bankers is also anti-Semitic because it can be ambiguously weaponed as an anti-Semitic dog whistle, right? Like that's, at that point, you're folding a lot in. You know, of course you can say from the river to the sea in an anti-Semitic way, but you can say a lot of stuff in an anti-Semitic way.
If it's justified, we have an ally that requires our help.
When this war began, President Biden said that Israel is facing sheer, pure, unadulterated evil. It was so obvious in the moment of shock after October 7th that for Israel to defend itself, it has to dismantle the Hamas terror regime, that President Barack Obama said we must stand by our ally Israel as it dismantles Hamas. The United States has made valuable support to Israel in its goal of bringing down the Hamas regime. What we need is pressure on Hamas and its patrons, Qatar, Turkey, and Iran, to let the hostages go. That pressure has not been forthcoming.
I mean, before I came on stage, Gershon Baskin, who is Israel's most famous hostage negotiator, he WhatsApped me and said he's got a deal, a 3-week deal on the table with Hamas that Hamas has agreed to release all the hostages and end the war. He says it's with Netanyahu. The ball's in Netanyahu's court. So when he keeps going on about hostages, tell him to speak to his former boss to agree to a hostage.
Gershon Baskin is the negotiator.
As for the United
in whose
States,
deal to free Gilad Shalit, we released Yehia Sinwar.
As for the United States, it is tragic to me as a citizen of the United Kingdom and the United States that my two countries have armed Israel as it carries out what the ICJ has called a plausible genocide, as it arms the Prime Minister who is wanted for war crimes.
Mr. Hassan.
This moderator, when Mehdi Hasan exposes a core flaw in the argument of the fascist. No more rhetorical questions, please. We've already acknowledged that he won't answer that one. This moderator, when the fascist interrupts Mehdi Hasan 16 times in a row during his, like, you know, pointed response to the question that hasn't even been answered yet, total silence.
The ICC chief prosecutor has called for the arrest of Yoav Gallant and Benjamin Netanyahu. The American government should not be arming a man wanted for war crimes, and Eylon Levy should have began his speech tonight apologizing for working for a man who is wanted for war crimes by the ICC chief prosecutor.
Mr. Donner, you called me to account at the beginning of the debate and said I should not have called my opponent a liar. The former president of the ICJ, Joan Donoghue, had to go on
many
TV.
Other judges disagreed with her.
Had to go on TV
the
to
American
explain
judge who let him speak.
The ruling did not define there was a plausible genocide.
Actually, the
she
other
had to
judges
go on
disagreed
TV to refute the lie. The only reason for you to make that lie,
the ICC chief prosecutor called for an arrest warrant,
whose arrest warrant claims were based on lies.
All right, this is not helping. We are not able to hear what anybody is saying. We're not able to hear what anybody's saying. You're both talking at the same time, and I'm talking at the third time. So let's stop this. I have a question for each of you before we pivot, which I want to ask you if you can answer without attacking one another. And I'm also curious to see if you can do it in under 20 seconds, because we're just curious. Each of you came to this debate, and by your decision to participate, we saw on social media that both of you were attacked by members of your own camp for being even on the stage with somebody who's holding...
You complain about the moderator, but Hassan is clearly bodying here. No. Oh, I would say so, yeah. I mean, this is one of the problems, I think, with, like, having a moderator and having an audience, and that all of them can kind of obfuscate the natural back and forth flow of the discussion. In terms of, like, who has the correct arguments, Hassan is obviously, it's not even it's you know, nuclear bomb versus coughing baby. You know, this is a war crime. In terms of, like, who's controlling the debate, the fascist is not entirely incompetent in this respect, but I still think it's a blowout from Hassan. But of course I agree with him.
The opposing view. But you showed up anyway. Eylon, why did you show up? 15 seconds.
Because Iran, the Palestinian nationalists, and their allies are waging a war of misinformation that has one purpose. They want to destroy Israel. And they think it will be much easier to destroy Israel if
Again, like a classic case of overstatement from the fascist. The idea that everyone who is critical of Israel's handling of this war wants to destroy Israel is laughable. People in chat are saying based right now because I have a leftist community. There are literally billions of people around the world who are critical of Israel in varying forms to varying extents, either because of well, anti-Semitism is definitely a part of it in many cases, especially in some of those Arab states, whether it's because they oppose the treatment of the Palestinian people, or they, you know, have heard about the unjustness of Israel's land acquisition. The details don't really matter. The idea that all of them just want Israel destroyed is ridiculous. Absolutely insane. But the fascist is prone to overstatement.
Convince the world that Israel deserves to be destroyed. A full campaign of the most ridiculous lies to try to convince good, ordinary Americans that when they're ready to pull the trigger and massacre us once more, they should stand to one side and say, well, the Jews had it coming. And I'm not willing to allow that to happen.
Everyone who criticizes Israel is anti-Semitic and wants Israel destroyed. Nah. Everyone's waging a war of disinformation. Not me, though. It's the same shit, man. It's the same damn playbook.
You recall the question?
Statement.
Sorry?
Okay, just a 20-second answer.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I believe that what is happening in Gaza, the killing of 16,000 children, the genocide in Gaza is the great moral tragedy of our time, the great crime of our time. And I will go almost anywhere and take a stage with almost anyone to try and bring that war to an end and convince people that the war needs to end now.
May I add something?
No, we have to move forward. All right, we're going to bring in some other voices now. We have some journalists. We have 4 journalists who are each going to ask one, I hope, very short question. There are people who have been writing about the area for a long time.
I don't even consider it a war. Yeah, no, I honestly, the term war in Gaza is euphemistic at best. You know, war requires a degree of symmetry, and this does not have that.
Particularly about the situation now, and they are certainly not monolithic in their own views. I first want to go to Peter Beinart. He's a journalist who's written for Time, the New York Times, the Atlantic. He's former editor of the New Republic and editor-at-large of Jewish Currents. Peter, if you can stand up, there's a microphone, I believe, in the aisle for you, and ask your incredibly short question.
Thank you. Elon, you suggested that the goal of the...
Holy, this guy looks a little bit like Charlie Kirk. Is anyone else seeing it a little bit? Maybe I'm totally off on this one. I'm getting I don't know. Thank you. No? Okay, maybe, I don't know. I see it? Okay, somebody else saw it. And as long as somebody out there got me, I'm not entirely alone.
war was to depose Hamas from power. But on October 11th, Benjamin Netanyahu said the goal of the war was to destroy Hamas. On October 12th, Yoav Gallant said, the defense minister said the goal was to wipe it from the earth, because I think they understood that even deposing Hamas would not necessarily make Hamas less of a fearsome threat. The Taliban didn't become less of a fearsome threat to the United States once they stopped holding power. Saddam and his forces didn't become less of a fearsome threat once they no longer held power. They recognized that winning this war meant destroying Hamas. And yet your own former colleague, Daniel Hagari, the IDF spokesman, said it's not possible. To be clear, I'd like you to be on the record. Do you think it's possible to destroy Hamas, or were Netanyahu and Gallant wrong?
I believe it is possible to remove the Hamas terror regime from power. Whether leaders used belligerent rhetoric that exaggerated the goals of the war. No, look, Hamas needs to be destroyed. It's an idea. Some ideas deserve to be destroyed. And whether that idea is destroyed or not depends on the lessons that the people of Gaza...
Again, Hamas isn't an organization or a distinct group. It's an idea. Hamas being an idea allows it a degree of abstraction and impermeability. Hamas isn't an organization with member tables. It's just, you know, things that are Hamas-esque. You can apply it to anyone. Civilians, babies. They're like, it's like a mind virus, you know?
Take from this war? Will they conclude that terrorism is a dead end, that their leaders have repeatedly led them into disaster after disaster as part of their forever war against the Jewish state in any borders whatsoever, or will they take the lesson that in fact they were rewarded for the October 7th massacre? That is what is at stake here, and we are trying to convince the people of Gaza terrorism is a dead end. There is no light at the end of that tunnel.
And you also get to...
Well, I have an idea to, you know, convince the civilian population that indiscriminate slaughter of civilians doesn't get you what you want by indiscriminately slaughtering their civilians and getting what we want.
Respond. You can respond.
You answer? I think Peter made the point very eloquently. It's a nonsensical war aims. The real war aims, of course, are what the Israeli minister say. When Smotrich says the aim of the war is to annihilate Gaza, that is the aim. I take him at his face value. When he literally says that. And when they say this stuff, when they talk about...
Mod, like unironically, Mod, what the f are you doing? You want quick answers. You want, like, you think it's uncivil to ask rhetorical questions, but you let him jab, like, every single time Hassan answers anything.
settling Gaza, when they talk about staying in Gaza,
Samantha.
that is what they mean. This is
Position
not
in
about,
which we
can I finish an
repeatedly
answer,
said
Elon, one
is
time?
not government policy and goes against government.
I would just say this.
Yeah, let him
say
finish,
this. You
please.
want to convince the people of Gaza that terrorism is a
Oh, yeah,
dead end,
8K.
then stop inflicting terrorism on them.
There you go.
Every accusation is a confession, Hamedi.
What does that even mean? Every accusation is a confession? How does that even apply to the statement that was made? If you want to end terrorism, stop doing it to them. Okay, it means nothing. I guess you could like kind of apply, like it kind of tracks in a way. I don't think that was applied appropriately.
Our next question comes from Jillian Lederman. Jillian is an editorial fellow at the Wall Street Journal.
It's a common Nazi statement. He's trying to imply Mehdi is a Nazi. Is that a Nazi statement? Every accusation is a confession? I thought I've seen that claim broadly made almost entirely by liberals against Republicans. I think the Nazi statement is they cry out in pain as they strike you. That's the one the Nazis coined against the Jews, which is funny because Nazis love to cry out in pain as they strike you, which is an example of every accusation being a confession. So in a way, it all comes back around to the central thesis of this channel, which is Nazis.
Former chief executive chair of the
Not
Israel
Diem,
Leadership
so.
Network. Jillian, thanks for joining us, and what's your question?
Thank you. My question is, given the current circumstances, do you believe that Israel pulling out of Gaza in 2005 was the right decision?
Who's that a question to?
It's a difficult question.
Let me just ask you, Jillian, are you pointing that to anybody in particular? Both can answer it, but okay.
Israel withdrew from the Gaza Strip in 2005 and never wanted to go back. It gave them...
Yeah, well, you know where Israel did want to go back to? The perimeter around the Gaza Strip, which it immediately fenced, put automated turrets, put a bunch of guards, you know, rigged that shit up to the to the gills, cut off water, cut off aid.
Gaza. They had the option to turn it into Singapore. They chose to turn it into Mosul. They could have...
That's so true, man. That's definitely not a statement made by a insane lunatic. Yeah, the Gaza Strip was definitely poised in a position to become Singapore. When Israel was pouring liquid cement into their wells and blocking water and power and blocking aid and blocking investment and preventing people from moving freely out of the borders. Yeah, they were definitely poised to become Singapore. That's so true.
Have had a thriving state in Gaza after...
This is, to me, the kind of stuff you hear that instantly disqualifies. Like, if this guy said the sky was blue, now I have, like, good reason to believe it's cloudy outside. That is a statement that can only be made by a deranged propagandist. I don't think you have to be a deranged propagandist to say stuff like Hamas is evil and Israel needs to destroy them. I think that a mostly reasonable person can come away with that position. I think that, you know, it can be dangerous and fascistic. I think sometimes it's just underinformed. The belief that the Gaza Strip was poised to become Singapore is something you could only say if you were a deranged propagandist. You have to be completely disconnected from reality.
Israel pulled out, and Jewish organizations paid to donate the greenhouses. Instead, they chose to rig Gaza for war. The tunnel network under Gaza is the largest public works project the Palestinians have ever undertaken. They did it for the sake of the October 7th massacre.
Was it a mistake to pull out? That was the question.
I don't know.
Okay. No, fair enough. Fair enough.
Simple answer is, of course, Israel did not pull out of Gaza. As the ICJ has pointed out just recently, Gaza is occupied territory. Let me put it very simply to you. What Elon doesn't tell you is when they pulled out, they kept control of Gaza's land borders,
Not with Egypt. Not with Egypt.
With
Of course
Egypt.
we control the
Israel and
borders.
Egypt
We're on the other
kept
side
the
of
land
this.
borders. Have you noticed I can never finish an answer without interruption? The land borders, the sea waters, the air, and wait for it. And the population registry. If you're born in Gaza, you have to be registered with the Israelis. If you were born in New York and your birth had to be registered with a foreign country, would you say you were occupied or not occupied? Would you say you're a free people or an unfree people? It's an absolute lie. The occupation never ended.
Israel ended the occupation of Gaza in 2005.
Then why did you keep the population?
Wait,
let me interrupt you. Why did you-
Hold it. We are done with the
Christ.
interruptions. It's just destructive. So you go.
The
You be
population
quiet.
registry
Your
isn't
turn
an
first.
interesting question because Israel runs it in cooperation with the PA as part of the Oslo Accords. Hamas is free to run its own population registry because it has effective
One
control
territory under
inside Gaza.
international law.
Mehdi,
Under
you get your shot.
international law,
None of this like takes away from colonial occupation. Like you can be a colonized people and still have your own internal governance.
occupation requires the effective control of territory. Everywhere in the world, it is understood to mean boots on the ground. And the only reason to fabricate a new standard to say that just because Israel...
This is like absolutely not the case. I mean, if you want to go back to like historical examples, what about Roman-controlled Judea? There are so many examples of empires having their own military, and then they conquer a population and they say, hey, you work for us now, you'll manage your own affairs, but you know who's the boss? We're the boss. Like, it's like, is every occupied territory in all of history have the soldiers of that empire constantly patrolling? No! Are you insane? That'd be expensive. All you have to do is control like key power centers and you can get them to mostly self-govern. But ultimately, they're still under the thumb of the empire. That happens all the time. That's like the default way you do it. 80 IQ emperor, day one of being emperor. I have a great idea. What if we used our expensive, finite supply of soldiers to police every square foot of every colonized population on Earth that we control, even though the local populations would hate the occupying soldiers way more than like essentially subcontracted local soldiers that we could just, you know, control the head officials of? Are you insane?
doesn't allow Hamas to build an Ismail Haniyeh International Airport, means that it is occupied, is as part of a campaign to try to make Israel responsible for civilians in Gaza so Hamas can take the resources...
Hey, Comrade Robin Hood, I'm not gonna lie, you're being awfully soy here. I don't give a shit about international law, and at no point would would I denigrate myself or like the definitions I apply here by suggesting that loopholes like, oh, technically you need troops in the territory to, like, why would I care? We're talking about the morality of the situation here. If international law was written up by colonial states, like cutting around the lines to make sure they could, to a large extent, hold what they had. We're like, if we were in a courtroom, we would make legal arguments about what is legally viable. But what am I, like, when I say genocide, do I say like, oh, well, here's the UN definition of genocide, like some kind of, I don't know, beta male? No. You talk about the intention, you talk about the interest, you talk about what they want, the eliminationist rhetoric. If I was subject, hey, when you say there's a trans genocide going on, it was like, oh, well, what UN definition of genocide conforms to that expectation? Like, no, of course not. It's the eliminationist intentions of the people perpetrating these actions. If you only call things out as genocide after you flip the gas switch on, you're kind of missing the point. I just don't understand. You're being very insistent on the technicalities, but I don't think you're doing it to enhance knowledge of the subject, Hey Comrade Robin Hood. I think you're doing it in a way that obfuscates. We know the Gaza Strip is occupied. This is an objective fact. Like, whether or not in the ICJ would agree with me on that is immaterial to me. That's not the only definition of occupation that I'm interested in.
Okay,
Elon,
we're losing sight of the question.
Briefly, very briefly. Elon, a moment ago, you all heard him proudly quoting the former president of the ICJ. The ICJ, literally, the other day, said Gaza is occupied. But Elon and I went to the same university. We did the same degree. He didn't do law. He's not a lawyer. The ICJ says Gaza is occupied. It's over. The debate's over. You've lost that one.
No, that's not the end. That is not the end. Because a basic principle of the...
So wait, what? So by what argument are we even saying that it's not occupied, like in the technical sense? Since the Israeli disengagement from Gaza in 2005, it is the prevailing opinion that Gaza is still under occupation according to international law. What? But wait, so hold on. Okay, Comrade Robin Hood, by what definition were you saying, like, under international law he's incorrect, so he shouldn't cite international law? Like, I'm not dying on the hill of the legal definition. I'm just curious by what would I'll find it 1 second. Okay. I just want to know, like, I would argue against the international law definition. It's not the point I'm making, but I want to know from what argument, that comes from. Israel's argued the territories in Palestine are disputed rather than occupied. Okay. It's also argued neither the Hague Regulatory Enforcement Geneva Convention limit the duration of occupation. Annexation is legal under international law. The prohibition of the acquisition of territory by force. The prime minister who did the disengagement of Gaza said Gaza is very much occupied still. Yeah, I don't know, like, what. Maybe Israel doesn't think they're occupying Gaza. Article 82 of the Hague Regulations of 1907. Okay, so wait. This isn't really an argument. I'm not a lawyer, but Article 42 of the Hague Regulations of 1907 defines occupation. Territory is considered occupied when it's actually placed under the authority of the hostile army. The occupation extends only to the territory where such authority has been established and can be exercised. We have already established that Israel can exercise military authority in the Gaza Strip. They're currently doing it. Like, this is... Comrade Robin Hood, why would you argue against what seems to be the majority opinion on the subject based on, like, a narrow interpretation of an over-century-old article? Like, that, this just seems like a nitpick that is meant to reduce the IQ of people who engage. Like, it's not, like, it's pedantry. It takes away from the issue, you know? I don't get it. I don't get it. But I'm not engaging with the legal argument on this, you know? Israel has broken the laws of my heart, and that's the point that I make on these streams. The fact that it seems a majority of people who talk about international law also think that they violated the law of international organizations is their case to make, I suppose.
One moment.
ICJ disagrees. You're done.
Jillian, do you feel that your question was answered? Was it a mistake to pull out of Gaza? Because I don't. But we're going to move on. Thank you for the question. It would be helpful, and I realize you're both very passionate and have a lot to say about this, but it would be helpful, at least at the beginning of your answers, to stick to the questions.
I did. I said they didn't pull out because they never pulled out. I mean,
okay.
I don't accept the premise of the question.
All right, fair enough. You question. No, next up.
It ripped people out of their homes.
I know.
Jesus Christ.
I was there. I witnessed it.
He witnessed it, Mehdi. It happened.
The part that you're talking about. Next up, we have Dean Obeidallah, a lawyer, a comedian, and a journalist who has hosted the Dean Obeidallah Show and a frequent commentator on CNN, MSNBC, and the Daily Beast. Dean, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I have a question for everyone. You've defended everything the Israeli military has done, everything, and Mehdi's gone through it. My family lives in the West Bank.
Bosch, do you see how I don't care about international law sounds bad in most contexts? I mean, if you want to be, like, deliberately uncharitable to the broader point I was making, but if you want me to do that to you now, I can say, since you're so concerned with law, is the legality of the Holocaust the only, like, determining factor you would use to make a moral judgment on it? Like, if someone came up to you and they were like, well, it was legal, would you be like, oh, or would you say, like, I don't care about German law in 1941? Come on, don't be a dipshit. Come on, let's turn. We're turning the tensions down. We're turning the IQ up. My points are clear. My heart is clear. The fire that burns within me burns stronger than ever. We're working together on this. It's been a long video. We're moving ahead. Okay, we're moving ahead.
My question is there anything that you would condemn Israel for in terms of killing Palestinian Christians and Muslims, or are they all inhuman in your view and not worthy of any sympathy, dignity, or self-determination as a people?
All right. Hang on a second. Hang on. I have an issue with the question. The first part of the question, is there anything you would condemn from Israel? Legitimate question. But the assumption that if he feels differently, that he has no sense of the humanity of Palestinians is a bit of some baggage loaded into the question. So why don't you take the question?
Is this guy okay?
Is there anything that Israel is doing that you would condemn?
I have gone on TV as a government spokesman when the army said that there was a particular mistake and a certain target should not have been hit.
What target?
We fess up and admit our mistakes because that is what a responsible military should do.
You can answer.
Okay.
But Israel is fighting an enemy whose use of war crimes is strategic and systematic. They're not investigated on Hamas's end. No one is ever called to account. Its use of war crimes against its own civilians while they hide behind them in their schools and hospitals to fire at us is strategic and systematic. And so I stand by my country as it fights to use proportionate force to dismantle the Hamas army of terror. Because yes, my neighbors are human.
Okay.
Because I want a better future.
I have a very important technical program note. I've received a message that the audience clapping volume is so loud that in the recording, Very frequently, it's been impossible to hear what our debaters are saying. And
don't clap.
And so what I would like you to do is to clap in between their points. Let them finish and then go for it, please.
The gentleman challenged my humanity, and I would like to defend it.
I tried to let this
I
go.
want a future of peace between us and our neighbors. That cannot happen as long as the Hamas terror regime is in power.
Okay.
On the subject of, I'll wait for the applause. On the subject of Elon's humanity, I asked him earlier if he supported the release of Palestinian children. He refused to say so. He can tonight. We'll all wear this pin. Let me
Mr.
say
Hassan,
this on the
any
West Bank.
children?
Let me say this on the West Bank. He cannot help but cherry pick the evidence. He cannot help but cherry pick the evidence. He just said a moment ago, he tried to gaslight you. He said, Hamas is never held to account. Actually, the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court gave out 5 arrest warrant requests. 3 for Hamas, 2 for Israel. I support all of those arrest warrant requests. Do you? Do you?
Mr. Hassan.
Do you? It's a yes or no question.
Every single line.
It's a yes or no question.
Every single line.
Do you support accountability for all of them?
Absolutely, but you and what army?
Do you support arrest warrants for Netanyahu?
What? Wait, excuse me?
Wait, now we can't hear what you're both saying.
Do you support arrest warrants for Netanyahu?
No, Mr. Hassan.
Was that was a very revealing little moment that Hassan seemed to not have a response to, because it was very, very revealing. You and what army? Was that a threat? The real position that the fascist holds is that he can kill Palestinians indiscriminately and you can't do anything about it. He'll do or say anything that he wants that is in the service of that slaughter because he enjoys it and he wants it to continue. The ultimate position then, if you were to amass all the evidence possible, an indisputable volume of evidence that a genocide is being committed, that Netanyahu is a perpetrator, which has already happened, but, you know, let's assume that tomorrow this was amassed. The only position he would have in response is, oh, you think we should be stopped? Just try. Because he doesn't actually care. Because might makes right is the moral framework of the fascist, you know? There's no actual belief of like, oh, well, now I've been convinced that my nation is in the wrong. That was very revealing. I'm going to rewind for a second.
All of those arrest warrant requests. Do you? Do you?
Mr. Hassan.
Do you? It's a yes or no question.
Every single line.
It's a yes or no question.
Every single line.
Do you support accountability for all of them?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sorry, really quickly, because I just, since it was brought up and it seems relevant, but the link that was given earlier about the definition of occupation, the Red Cross considers what's happening in Palestine occupation. So even like on the website linked, see, we saw this right here under international humanitarian law, there's an occupation and so on and so forth. And then if we scroll down, what does the law say? From the International Review of the Red Cross, automating occupation. International humanitarian and human rights law implicates the deployment of facial recognition technologies in the occupied Palestinian territory. I can't not point that out.
But you and what army?
You support arrest warrants for Netanyahu?
Wait, now we can't hear what you're both saying.
You support arrest warrants for Netanyahu?
No, Mr. Hassan, because every single line in the request for arrest warrants
wait a minute.
by the prosecutor of the ICC is based on lies, like the allegation of starvation, impossible to reconcile with over 1 million tons of aid that have entered Gaza since the start of this war. Aboard more than 52,000 trucks.
69 trucks right now. Did you know that?
Mr. Hassan,
69 trucks, according to 15 aid agencies.
Who are they
Who should we believe? 15 aid agencies or you and Netanyahu?
Mr. Hassan, who are they
should we believe?
Mr. Hassan.
15 aid
Mr. Hassan.
Or you?
These aid agencies are quoting UNRWA.
The aid
Do you
agencies are
believe that
Hamas.
UNRWA's statistics are accurate, yes or no?
Actually, no.
Excuse me, wait a minute.
It's a lie.
Is this helpful?
Excuse me, are we being perhaps a little rude right now about the slaughter of children? He says after, like, the interruptions are almost exclusively coming from the fascist, this guy. Like, I feel like the debate should end with the you and what army, genuinely, because it's such an obvious admission that the fascists' beliefs are not governed by any moral position, but rather by, like, we are right because we are right. If you can stop us, then try.
Yes, for some, okay.
Well, lies need to be stopped.
I would just
it's
like
an announcement of bad faith. This
okay.
is, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this here, this is like a Weimar moment to a large extent. This was like the liberal disagreement with the Nazis leading into the Nazis having power. Ideologically, the fascist here is not very distinguishable from a Nazi. The arguments, justifications, excuses, obfuscations, and underlying moral framework that he holds are textbook of fascists, and Nazism is a fascist ideology. The differences are largely about which group is the in-group and which group is the out-group. Otherwise, the strategies are employed almost identically. So we're seeing here, like, you know, in this case, Mehdi Hasan is liberalism or perhaps progressivism's greatest soldier, creating the best possible arguments, the best rebuttals. You know, he's doing a phenomenal job. And then what does he get out of the fascist? You and what army? And it's just such a perfect encapsulation of the problem. You can debate them over and over and over and over and over again until the cows come home. And it can be useful to convince people. I'm happy Mehdi Hasan did the debate, but at the end of the day, debate cannot convince him because he never believed any of this to begin with. He didn't believe any of this. None of this mattered to him.
And not talk at the same time. You're doing worse at waiting. Get better.
How dare you, sir?
Over 1 million tons of aid. Now, according to Mr. Hassan, I don't know what double-digit number he quoted, comes from UNRWA. UNRWA's own dashboard on its website says that this is an incomplete register of data, that it cannot monitor all the cargo going in. Israel is monitoring it. UNRWA is undercounting it by a factor of 10. That's how you get to the bizarre statements like imminent famine in Gaza, because the IPC Review Committee said that that assessment was based on not counting all of the trucks that have gone in. They literally undercounted trucks in order to make this horrific allegation of starvation.
So the entire
your point.
I mean, you can believe like every international aid organization on Earth saying that they face deprivation and they're eating like dirt to survive, or you can believe the guy who jerks off to the thought of killing Palestinian babies. I mean, it's up to you, man. I can't tell. It's a he said, she said, or I guess in this case, a he said, they said, and the they is every aid organization, and the he is the grinning fascist.
To the speech.
Respond.
So you just began the whole answer premised on a lie. It's not based on UNRWA statistics. It's based on their own experiences at Israeli crossings. David Miliband, Elon. David Miliband, a man you know, we're both British in front of this audience. David Miliband was the former foreign minister of the UK, very pro-Israeli politician, served under Blair and Brown, not some Palestinian lover. David Miliband said on CNN, our trucks are being stopped because they're finding a tiny little surgical scissor or a nail clipper and they're sending the trucks back. David Miliband is not some hater of Israel. Cindy McCain is the head of the World Food Programme.
That's the main excuse Israel uses to send back aid trucks. They prohibit, I don't know what the technical term they use is, maybe you'll remind me, mixed use items. Any item that can be used in a military context, they send back. So like dual use technology. Yeah, so like, yeah, sugar can be combusted in some context or something. This loaf of bread could be sharpened into a shiv. You could freeze this water into ice and use it to make IDF soldiers trip over an ice patch and hit their head. You know, stuff like that. I mean, that sounds ludicrous, but genuinely, you can look online. Some of the things the IDF has sent aid trucks back for, I'm not even exaggerating by that much. It's pretty crazy. Trying to see if I can find some of the more, like, exceptionally goofy dual use. Oh, God, words? I can't read these. Ah, yeah, here we go. Prioritizing what items should be delivered to Gaza normally requires coordination among UN and humanitarian actors working inside Gaza, who then consult this list with the Egyptian Red Crescent, UN agencies, and COGAT outside of Gaza. There are multiple disconnects between the prioritized items and those actually delivered. The biggest challenge is Israel's rejection of critical aid supplies that it considers to be dual-use items. Per Refugee International's interview with aid officials, rejected items can range from water purification tabs to nail clippers to insulin pens to tent poles, because you could, you know, stab an IDF soldier, I guess, to green-colored sleeping bags, I don't know, to field hospital boxes, to medical kits, to water filters, to generators and batteries, to ultrasound devices, to fire hoses and ventilators. But it's like everything, basically. If they don't want to let an aid truck in, they don't want to let an aid truck in.
The widow of the most pro-Israeli senator of my lifetime, John McCain. She has accused Israel of blocking aid trucks, killing aid workers, starving children. Cindy McCain is not UNRWA or Hamas.
So Israel's going with the anything's a weapon if you're creative enough line? Yeah, because a lot of that stuff they say will be used to make concrete that can go into making tunnels or whatever. I mean, they'll say anything. Like, it's not like... I mean, they don't need to have a good reason. They just want to kill Palestinians. It's not... Yeah, ultrasound devices an ultrasound device works a lot like that perk in Call of Duty where you can see close range through walls. They're worried about, you know, Hamas insurgents planting it against a wall and seeing like the heat map sensor of the soldiers on the other side, you know. It's a real concern.
Dean, we are a long, long way from the question you asked. I don't know. That's bad moderating. I'm sorry that I... We have another question from John Levine. John is a political reporter for the Sunday New York Post. He has credits on CNN.com, The Atlantic, The Chronicle of Higher Education. John, thank you for joining us. And come on in with your question, if you could stand up.
Mike. Okay. Thank you both for being here. My question is for Mehdi. I think it's an easy question, so I hope we can get a direct answer. I'd like to ask you about your new media startup, Zeteo. In May, Rolling Stone reported that
John, this has got to be on the point we're just debating.
It relates to Qatar, which I believe was brought up in the debate.
We're debating whether Israel's actions were justified. That's not on point. I'm sorry, I got to pass on it.
I'm happy to
Oh, damn. Don't warn them ahead of time what your question is going to be. You know, just belt it out.
John, I'm happy to take the question. I'm happy to.
We're not here to talk about your career.
Almost positive the question would have been like some psycho shit, by the way. Just vibe off the bat. It would have been like, why are you a slave of the Qatari government or something? It would have been like that, basically.
I know you are, and I'm not. So I'm sorry, John. If you want to come up with a question that's on point about Israel's actions in Gaza, go for it, please. Yeah, I can, because this is a debate where you ask questions.
This is a surprisingly, like, aggressive environment.
I mean, now I really want to ask the question. I'm just curious. I just want to answer the question.
You can talk afterwards. All right.
I mean, the dude works for the New York Post. I prefer not to talk to him, but...
Thank you, Austin.
It's not my debate.
Thank you. Thank you.
Based.
All right. We are coming down to the end for our closing statements, and that's where each debater has the floor again exclusively to make their case one more time for you. Elon, you're up first in this. One more time to remind people, I think they know that you're arguing that Israel's actions in Gaza are justified. You can take the floor, and you have 2 minutes to tell us why. 2.5 minutes to tell us why.
After the sadistic massacre of...
Again, we're running through the greats right here at the end, okay? It's always about good and evil. It's never about what actually happens. It's always like the narrative of good and evil. It's about the story you tell.
October 7th. Hamas immediately told us, if you leave us on our feet, we will do this again and again. It wasn't enough to cremate little children. It wasn't enough to commit acts of gang rape, pedophilia, necrophilia. It wasn't...
Again, like literally, like me reading through the giant list of scary things. Like, I'm sorry, I have no respect for tactics like this. They have nothing to do with shedding light on a situation or enhancing your understanding of it or trying to build a better world. It's entirely about activating the part of your, the amygdala? Fear and disgust. The part of your brain that makes you make terrible decisions, the part of the brain that is, and this is not an exaggeration or a joke, physically larger in right-leaning individuals. That is not a joke. That is literally true. That part of the brain that makes you feel fear and disgust is enlarged in conservatives. You know, I talk about there not being a categorical difference in the brains, but in this respect, there's data to back it up. Though this is a difference that is cultivated. The parts of your brain that you use are the ones that get stronger. After all, you know, you do math, you get better at math, you feel fear and terror all the time, you experience fear and terror all the time. Those parts of your brain get stronger. I have no respect for it.
It's enough to gag people.
See, they're literally, like, even an admission. This has nothing to do with enhancing knowledge. This is just about evoking emotion. Fear and disgust. Activate fear and disgust. Fear and disgust. You should be able to make a compelling case for your belief without using these appeals to emotion. I think appeals to emotion can be very effective rhetorically, but I think it says a lot that Mehdi Hasan can talk about the genocide of the Palestinians in a very matter-of-fact, direct, and straightforward way, whereas this guy has to soy out for 8 minutes every time.
Bind them, tie them to trees, and strip them. They told us, we're coming for you. If you leave us on our feet, we will do this again and again. This war has been horrible. We have paid a horrific price for it. We are trying to prevent the threat of a repeat October 7th massacre. And we are fighting a sadistic enemy that rigged the battlefield in a way that said, we've hidden our military assets under civilians. The only way that you can get to us is by going through civilians. And that's why Israel has taken more actions than any military in the history of the world. And so every commander from Afghanistan...
The ludicrous overstatement. Again, it can never be a statement made in moderation. It can never be like a modest statement. It always has to be the greatest battle of good and evil that has ever taken place in all of human history.
And Iraq will agree, in order to keep the civilians safe from their own leader's sick strategy of trying to sacrifice them. That is why it keeps telling them to evacuate. It never designated a safe zone where Hamas terrorists could abuse hostages with impunity. It told them to go where it is safer and where Hamas is not. And on every occasion, it has been stymied by UN agencies saying, no, keep them in Hamas strongholds. By Hamas trying to fight to keep them in the strongholds, while we try to keep them safe from their own psychopath leaders. I asked Mr. Hassan, removing Hamas from power, legitimate, yes or no? And he wriggled out of it. He said, well, defending Israel is legitimate, but not the point you go into Gaza. Okay, his response, end the occupation. Let Hamas have an Ismail Haniyeh International Airport. Let it have a Mohammed Dev naval base. There is nothing you can do with a terror regime that is sworn to your destruction, whose goals are legitimately genocidal. We need this war to end. But we need this war to end in a way that ensures that Hamas cannot restart it at a time of its choosing, feeling emboldened and empowered.
Notice how even through all of this, the fascist has not outlined any condition that would allow the war to end ever. Like, he's been inconsistent on what can even be done. Can Hamas be defeated? Can they be meaningfully stopped? At what point does the war actually end? You know, ideally a war is supposed to have an end point, but he hasn't really laid it out. He said that Hamas has been militarily crippled, but he doesn't want the war to end right now because they might do more in the future. He's admitted that Hamas can't be destroyed entirely, and he condemns the overstatements made by, Gallant and Netanyahu, but he hasn't laid out any... So Hamas has been defeated, but they haven't been defeated, but Hamas is an idea, not an organization, and he can't stop the war. You're right, Fluffernutter, truly. The genocide of the Palestinian people is about the journey, not the destination. It's about stopping and smelling the roses. They don't want an end to the war because the only... First of all, a fascist never wants an end to a war, ever. The fascist cannot ever promote the end to a war because war is what justifies the fascism. That is the state of existence they want maintained. They can't maintain it indefinitely, which is why fascism is naturally self-destructive, but, you know. And that's why now, with Hamas being effectively completely neutered as a threat, where do Israel's ambitions lie now? What have we seen in the past few weeks? Yesterday, hundreds of people were killed in Lebanon through indiscriminate bombings. They've said now the war is to the north. The war will literally never end. It will continue with Hezbollah. They will move into Syria if they need to. It would not be the first time Israel has done this. It's not like any of this is unprecedented. They will do anything and everything. Then Iran, they would. It would be ruinous, but that wouldn't stop them. Hitler invaded the Soviet Union. That wasn't a very good idea.
Because of international pressure generated by people like Mehdi Hassan to keep saving it from the wars that it starts.
And Mehdi Hassan, you have the final word in this debate one more time. Your argument for why Israel's actions in the Gaza war were not justified.
Ladies and gentlemen, were the actions of Israel in Gaza justified? Look, the argument is pretty simple tonight and pretty hypocritical from Elon. What we've heard tonight is that nothing justifies October the 7th, but October the 7th justifies everything. Well, I'm here tonight to tell you, no, October the 7th does not justify everything. It does not justify the suffering in Gaza. It does not justify the killing of kids in Gaza. It does not justify the starvation in Gaza. It does not justify the rape and torture of Palestinian detainees, which Elon refused to condemn tonight. It does not justify any of that. It doesn't justify the tearing up of the Geneva Conventions, the defiance of international law and the ICC and our own...
Notice how when Mehdi Hasan describes the many brutalities that Israel has committed and that the fascist refuses to condemn, he doesn't luridly describe it with 30 seconds of disgusting, dripping detail. He just lists it because he's interested in an actual, factual accounting of what has happened and what should be done. He's not interested in relying on shortcutting to people's emotional senses of fear and rage and disgust. He can rely on an actual, logical position to do the work for him.
Leahy law. Yes, October the 7th was a war crime, but the response to a war crime is not to commit your own series of war crimes on an epic scale. 33 times as many people killed since October the 7th as were killed on October the 7th. And I'll say this to you. Look, very, very clearly, if you support this motion tonight, you are opening the gates of hell. Not just in Gaza, but globally, because every dictator and tyrant around the world will say,
well, the gates of hell are already open to people like the fascists, so, you know.
Israel's actions were justified? Then so are mine. Putin, Assad, Kim, they'll all say, Israel killed kids. Israel killed aid workers. Israel killed journalists. So can we. And I will be very clear. I will be very clear with you tonight. If you are here tonight, ladies and gents, if you're here tonight to defend what Israel's done, knowing full well what Israel has done, if you're defending the human suffering in Gaza, the amputation of little kids, if you're doing that in full knowledge, then you're not just here to defend the indefensible or justify the unjustifiable.
It's worth noting, by the way, that if Mehdi Hasan was as allergic to concession as the fascist is, he would be defending October 7th. Remember, to the fascist, this is the greatest battle of good versus evil in human history. We are the most moral army in the world. The Hamas are barbaric, they're animals. If Mehdi Hasan was engaged in that same kind of rhetoric, then he would be over here, like, you know, chanting in Arabic the Psalms from the Quran to justify the eradication of Israel. That degree of insane us versus them, it doesn't matter what morality is, I'm only here for the team sports bullshit, that is a fascist trait. Mehdi Hasan is not engaging in it. His behavior, his responses, his positions are moderated. He cuts through it. He arrives at the morally correct conclusion. As long as you're in favor of things like, you know, innocent people shouldn't be killed. I'm not a moral realist. I just think we tend to share a lot of the same intersubjectively held axioms, but certainly I seem to share a lot of them with Mehdi Hasan.
I'm sorry, you're a sociopath. And I will say to you... Please, don't be a sociopath tonight. Don't support war crimes. Don't defend a genocide. Join me and every human rights organization in the world, every humanitarian aid agency on the planet, every American doctor and nurse who's been out to volunteer in Gaza. Join us in opposing this ridiculous and offensive and horrendous motion. And on behalf of the Al-Dos family, who Elon clearly doesn't give a damn about, I beg to oppose this motion.
Stop fighting! Is this an actual balanced audience? One half of the audience is clearly here for Hasan, and the other half is here for the fascist. And we've done it. I mean, we've got some conclusion stuff, but we did a big video. It's been a while since we've done a big video. I just want to say, as we wrap up this video, because this is going to be a YouTube segment, please consider supporting Progressive Victory, ! PV Donate. It would really mean a lot. They use that money very well. They're canvassing right now all over the country. They've got an event up in Wisconsin on October 5th and 6th. They want to bring a lot of canvassers out there. You can only donate if you're American. You can canvass and phone bank whether or not you're an American. You can phone bank from anywhere, though I would recommend you be able to speak English pretty well for obvious reasons. You don't have to be American citizen to canvass, but of course canvassing is done door to door, so you have to be in America to do it. They do lots of really good work, and I really appreciate all the donos, thousands raised, just while going over this. You can also text bank. They also do text banking, is my understanding, though I think that depends on which campaign they're working with. If you want to know more, ! PV, you can join their Discord, you know?
I am curious. Did anybody have their minds changed tonight?
That is not what debate is for.
By anything they heard? Wow. All right. Thanks. John Levine. Yeah. So here's the thing. The reason I turned down John's question, we really tried to preserve the integrity of what a debate is supposed to be, and it's supposed to be about the question, and it's supposed to stay on the question, and it's supposed to avoid personal attacks. But you came all this way, and many would actually...
Comrade Robin Hood, why Why this? Why this? I ask you, why this? Why?
Teams like to answer the question, so go for it. This is an extra.
You were accused of being in the pay of... Yeah. Elon accused you of being in the pay of Qatar earlier. You took objection to that. I'd like you to be able to dispel that you're taking any money from Qatar by confirming that you're not taking money for Zeteo for Qatar. Is Qatar funding Zeteo? Yes or no?
It's a great question, John, because you work as a media correspondent for the New York Post. No, I'm not. I'm answering your question. Patience, we waited for you. You're a media columnist for the New York Post, were you not?
I'm a political reporter for the New York Post.
You were at one time a media columnist. You should read the Washington Post interview that I did literally when Zeteo was founded. And Jeremy Barr, an excellent reporter, slightly better one than you, he asked me that question. And I said, no, we haven't taken any money from foreign governments or foreign citizens. Every investor in Zeteo is an American citizen, has nothing to do with Qatar. So nice try, better luck next time. By the way, since we're all in the spirit of asking questions, how do you feel about taking money from the racist Rupert Murdoch every day? All right.
God, I love him.
All right. I regret taking that question. I regret the times this debate failed to be high-minded by two people whom I otherwise respect. And
whom I otherwise respect. Mehdi Hasan did nothing disrespectful at any point during this. He did nothing. He brought honor upon himself. You. I reject this moderator. That was a good-ass video. Man, I really like him. I really like Mehdi Hasan. I really do. I really do. He's a good guy. Folks, believe it or not, it's not actually good for your mental health to consume political news nonstop 24/7, especially in fraught times like these, and then not actually do anything about it. You know, you're just sitting there, you're thinking, what are you doing? I've got good news for you. Progressive Victory right now is gunning up for a big event October 5th and 6th in Wisconsin, canvassing for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, our preferred candidate for the presidency and vice presidency, if you didn't know. And they're doing phone banking and canvassing all over the country, okay? Basically what I'm saying is, you should check out Progressive Victory's activities, you know? Pinned comment down below. I know you're thinking I'm busy, I don't want to do it, it's going to be difficult. I get so many people saying it's better than they think it's going to be. It's good. At least take a look. There's a lot going on. Maybe you think, oh, I'll contribute an hour a week, and then it turns out, you know, maybe you contribute 2 hours. You're having so much fun. Just give it a look.